You have just woken up as a brown bear in a melting mountain forest. For the next 3 hours, you are going to experience a starving belly after winter sleep, the frenzy of chasing salmon in icy rapids, and even a tense stare down with a bigger bear over a berry patch, and this won't be easy. So good luck. But before we get into this journey of a brown bear, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe, like the video, and why not leave a comment on where you are tuning in from and what animal you want me to cover next. Now let's begin this epic adventure together. Consciousness seeps back slowly, like meltwater through spring soil. Your eyelids flutter open in perfect darkness, pupils dilating wide to catch any hint of light filtering through your winter shelter. The first sensation isn't sight, it's the deep, bone-level stiffness that has settled into every joint during months of dormancy. Your massive frame, once cushioned by thick layers of autumn fat, now feels hollow against the earth floor of your den. The air tastes different. Gone is the sharp, sterile bite of deep winter cold, replaced by something softer, damper, alive with possibility. Your nostrils flare, analyzing the chemical messages drifting through the den entrance. Meltwater, fresh earth, the green smell of awakening vegetation, and underneath it all, the faint but unmistakable scent of other creatures stirring from their own winter retreats. Your heart, which has beaten slowly and steadily through the dormant months, begins to quicken, not yet to its summer rhythm, but faster than the hibernation pulse that has sustained you since the snows first began to fall. Each beat sends blood flowing through vessels that have carried you through the lean months on stored fat and recycled water. Your kidneys, liver, and other organs begin their gradual return to full function after their winter slowdown. The den around you feels smaller now, not because it has shrunk, but because your awareness is expanding. During the deepest part of winter, your world contracted to just this hollow beneath the fallen log, this depression you carved with your claws last autumn. Now your senses are reaching outward, sampling the air currents, listening for the subtle sounds that will tell you about the world beyond your shelter. A slow inventory begins. You shift your weight, feeling the response of muscles that have maintained just enough tension to keep you alive, but have lost much of their autumn power. Your front paws flex, claws extending and retracting, testing their sharpness against the packed earth. The thick pads on your feet, cracked and worn from last year's travels, have softened during the winter rest, but will toughen again with use. Your fur has grown thicker during the cold months, a dense undercoat trapped beneath longer guard hairs that have protected you from the worst of winter's bite. Now that coat feels almost too warm as your body temperature rises from its winter minimum. You'll shed much of it in the coming weeks, leaving it on branches and rocks as you move through your territory, marking your passage for other bears to read. The scent information continues to flow through your sensitive nose. No immediate danger that would have triggered a faster awakening. Adrenaline flooding your system even before full consciousness returned. But there are stories in the air. A fox passed nearby recently, probably investigating the den entrance with typical vulpine curiosity. Ravens have been calling from the ridge above, their voices carrying news of carrion somewhere in the valley below. Most importantly, you detect no sign of other bears in the immediate vicinity. The overlapping territories of your kind create invisible boundaries that shift with the seasons, and spring emergence is a delicate time for renegotiating those borders. A smaller bear stumbling into the domain of a larger, hungrier one fresh from winter dormancy might find themselves in serious trouble. Temperature shock awaits beyond the den entrance. Your body has been perfectly insulated in this underground shelter, protected from the wildest swings of mountain weather. Outside, spring in the high country means dramatic daily temperature, shifts warm afternoons that can melt snow into rushing streams, followed by nights that still bring hard frost. Your emergence must be timed carefully, when the day has warmed enough to prevent the dangerous heat loss that could exhaust your limited energy reserves. The urge to move grows stronger. Your bladder, which has processed minimal waste during the dormancy period, now signals the need for relief. Your stomach, shrunken from months without food, begins to contract with the first hints of returning appetite. These are the body's signals that winter's grip is truly loosening, that the time for action has arrived. But survival in the wilderness means never rushing. Even though every instinct now pushes toward movement, toward the urgent business of spring feeding, you remain still for several more minutes, listening, tasting the air, allowing your nervous system to fully boot up after its long winter standby mode. This patience, learned through years of successful emergence, could mean the difference between a successful transition to the active season and a fatal miscalculation in these vulnerable first hours. Finally, when the sun has climbed high enough to warm the air outside your den, when the scent trails tell you the immediate area is clear, when your muscles feel ready to support your weight, you begin the slow crawl toward daylight. Each movement is deliberate, calculated to conserve energy while maintaining silence. The real work of spring finding food, reclaiming territory, preparing for the intense months ahead is about to begin. Stretch, scan, sniff, rebooting the senses. Daylight hits your eyes like a physical blow. After months of den darkness, even the filtered spring sunshine streaming through the forest canopy seems blindingly bright. You blink repeatedly, pupils contracting rapidly, as your vision adapts to the world beyond your winter shelter. The snow that surrounded your den when you entered hibernation has mostly melted, leaving behind patches of dirty white in the deepest shadows and exposed earth that steams gently in the warming air. Your first full breath of outside air floods your system with information. The world has changed dramatically since you last experienced it fully conscious. New scents layer over familiar ones, the green smell of emerging vegetation, mixing with the musty odor of decomposing leaves exposed by melting snow. A creek that was frozen solid when you denned up now gurgles somewhere below, carrying snowmelt toward the valley floor. Bird calls echo from different locations than you remember, species returning from southern migrations or moving to new territories after the winter shuffle. Movement feels strange after so many months of stillness. Your joints protest as you stretch, extending each leg fully before testing your weight on it. The massive muscles of your shoulders and haunches have maintained basic function through the winter, but they lack the fluid power they'll need for the intense foraging and territory maintenance ahead. Each stretch sends signals through your nervous system, re-establishing the connection between brain and body that makes you one of the forest's most formidable inhabitants. The urge to mark your presence becomes overwhelming. You approach a mature pine tree near your den entrance, studying its bark for the claw marks you left there last autumn. The scratches are still visible, weathered but clear, advertising your presence to any bear who might have passed this way during your dormancy. Standing on your hind legs, you reach as high as possible, claws extended, and rake new marks into the bark above the old ones. The physical act feels good, stretching your spine and shoulders while announcing to the world that you've survived another winter. Scent marking follows immediately. You rub your shoulders, back, and rump against the scarred bark, depositing oils from scent glands onto the tree. These chemical signatures carry complex information: your identity, health status, sexual condition, and recent diet. Other bears reading this message in the coming days will know instantly that a large, healthy adult has reclaimed this territory. The ritual is both practical communication and personal satisfaction, like stretching after a long sleep. Your nose continues its systematic survey of the surrounding area. A deer passed through recently, probably within the last day, following a game trail that leads toward better browse at lower elevation. The scent is fresh enough to be interesting, but not so immediate as to suggest easy hunting. Deer in early spring are alert and energetic, having survived the winter and eager to take advantage of new growth. Catching one would require more energy than you can afford to spend right now. More promising is the faint odor of death somewhere downhill, not fresh enough to be dangerous. No hint of the aggressive scents that surround a recent kill defended by predators or scavengers. This smells like winter mortality, an animal that didn't survive the cold months and is now thawing in the spring warmth. Exactly the kind of easy protein your depleted system needs to begin rebuilding strength. Your ears, nearly as important as your nose for gathering information, work systematically through the forest soundscape. The creek's murmur provides a baseline against which other sounds register. A woodpecker hammers insects from dead wood somewhere to your left. Small birds flit through the underbrush with the urgent energy of creatures who must eat constantly to maintain their high metabolisms. No sounds suggest immediate danger, no alarm calls, no large animals moving through thick brush, no human voices or mechanical noise. Vision, your least reliable sense but still crucial for navigation, shows you a forest in transition. Snow persists in deep drifts on north-facing slopes, but south-facing areas show patches of bare earth where early wildflowers are already emerging. The familiar landmarks of your territory are all present: the lightning-struck snag that serves as a boundary marker, the cluster of aspen trees where grouse drummed last spring, the rocky outcrop that provides a good vantage point for surveying the valley below. Your internal map begins to update with winter's changes. A large tree has fallen across what used to be an easy travel route, probably brought down by heavy snow or wind. The beaver pond at the valley's edge appears larger than you remember, suggesting the industrious rodents expanded their dam during your absence. These are the kinds of changes that require adjustment to your movement patterns and foraging strategies. Temperature regulation becomes a conscious concern now. Your thick winter coat, perfect for den life, feels heavy and warm in the spring air. You'll need to find opportunities to cool down during the heat of the day, while avoiding the chill that can still descend at night. A good wallowing spot, a muddy area, or shallow pool will be essential for the coming weeks. As your body adjusts to active life and begins shedding winter fur, the first foraging decision presents itself almost immediately. Near the base of a rotting log, your nose detects the promising scent of grubs and insects that have been active beneath the bark while you slept. This represents exactly the kind of easy, high-protein food your system needs right now. But accessing it means energy expenditure, tearing apart the log, digging through debris, competing with other creatures who've already discovered this resource. First, forage loop energy triage. Every calorie counts now. This fundamental truth governs every decision as you begin your first systematic food search of the season. Your body, operating on reserves that sustained you through the long winter, cannot afford wasteful movements or unsuccessful hunts. Each step must be calculated, each foraging attempt evaluated for its likelihood of success versus energy expenditure. The rotting log near your den entrance becomes your first target. Approaching it slowly, you use your nose to map the exact locations where insect activity is highest. Beetle larvae and carpenter ant colonies have been at work in the soft, decaying wood, creating pockets of high-protein food that represent excellent return on investment. Your claws, sharp from their winter rest, tear into the bark with surgical precision. The first section yields immediate results. Fat, white grubs curl in the exposed wood, their bodies rich with the proteins and fats your depleted muscles desperately need. You pick them out carefully with your dexterous lips, each one providing concentrated nutrition that your digestive system can process quickly. The methodical work is satisfying low risk, guaranteed reward, the kind of foraging that builds strength rather than depleting it. Carpenter ants emerge from their disturbed galleries, some carrying larvae in their mandibles as they attempt to evacuate their young. These too become food, their bodies providing different nutrients than the wood-boring grubs. Your tongue works precisely, selecting the largest individuals while avoiding the soldiers whose mandibles could deliver painful bites to your sensitive mouth tissues. 20 minutes of careful excavation yields enough protein to notice the difference in your energy levels. Not abundance that will come later in the season, but enough to fuel the next phase of your morning forage loop. Your metabolic furnace, running at minimum capacity for months, begins to burn slightly brighter. Movement between feeding sites requires careful route planning. The shortest distance between 2 points might cross open areas where you'd be visible to potential competitors or predators. Better to follow the edge zones, the boundaries between forest types, the margins of meadows, the transitions between dense timber and more open areas. These environments typically offer both concealment and diverse foraging opportunities. A promising scent trail leads downhill toward the creek drainage. Something died here during the winter, not recently enough to be dangerous, not so long ago as to be useless. The smell suggests a deer, possibly a young animal that couldn't maintain body condition through the harsh months. Carrion represents the ultimate energy bargain. High-quality protein and fat with minimal expenditure required to obtain it. Following the scent trail requires crossing a small clearing where melting snow has created a muddy depression. Your tracks will be visible here to any other bears who pass through, advertising your presence and movement patterns. This becomes part of the territory negotiation that governs bear society, leaving sign that communicates your presence while reading the messages left by others. The creek itself provides the next foraging opportunity. Snowmelt has swollen it beyond its winter boundaries, but the edges remain shallow and accessible. Overturned rocks in the shallows reveal caddisfly larvae, mayfly nymphs, and other aquatic insects. Your sensitive paws work through the gravel, selecting the largest and most nutritious specimens. This type of foraging, systematic, patient, focused on easy targets, will occupy most of your energy during these crucial early weeks. Unlike the salmon runs of late summer or the berry abundance of early fall, spring food sources require careful searching and efficient processing. Every meal must yield more energy than you spend obtaining it. A fox cache provides an unexpected windfall. The red fox who established this territory overlap with yours has hidden portions of a winter-killed rabbit beneath a pile of forest debris. The meat is partially decomposed but still nutritious, and the bones provide calcium your system needs. More importantly, this represents food you didn't have to hunt or even search for extensively. Ravens have been watching your movements from the surrounding trees. These intelligent scavengers understand that bear activity often leads to feeding opportunity, scraps left behind, carcasses exposed by your digging, insects disturbed from their hiding places. Their presence becomes part of the forest information network, their calls potentially alerting other animals to your location. Territory edges become apparent through scent posts left by neighboring bears. An adult female with cubs has been active in the drainage to the east, her marking pattern suggesting she's claimed the best early foraging areas in that direction. A large male has left claw marks on trees to the west, his sign fresh enough to indicate active territorial defense. These invisible boundaries shape your foraging routes, encouraging you to focus on areas where you're less likely to encounter aggressive competition. The balance between energy intake and expenditure governs every choice. A promising scent trail leading uphill toward a potential carcass must be weighed against the calories required to investigate it. A patch of emerging skunk cabbage offers nutritious greens but requires extensive travel across difficult terrain. The roots visible in a distant stream bank might yield high-quality food but would require risky exposure in open areas. By mid-morning, your first foraging loop has provided enough nutrition to stabilize your energy levels without exhausting your reserves. The careful accounting that governs early spring survival shows a modest positive balance enough to justify continuing your systematic search for food while beginning the longer-term work of reclaiming and defending your territory. Each successful foraging decision builds toward the abundance you'll need to carry you through the breeding season and beyond. Rivers unlock, snowmelt roar. The sound reaches you before the sight, a deep, continuous rumble that speaks of water moving with serious intent. Winter's grip on the high country is breaking spectacularly, sending months of accumulated snow cascading toward the valley floor in torrents that reshape the landscape daily. The creek that murmured gently near your den has become a roaring river, swollen with snowmelt and carrying the debris of winter's end. Standing at the forest edge, you survey the transformed waterway with the cautious respect earned through years of spring experience. The water runs coffee brown with sediment, moving fast enough to knock even a bear your size off balance. But within that dangerous flow lies opportunity fresh. Green shoots emerging along the newly expanded banks, insects stirred up by the turbulent water, and the possibility of fish moving with the high water. Your nose works systematically through the complex scent palette that surrounds flowing water in spring. The mineral smell of snowmelt mixes with the organic odors of disturbed soil, decomposing vegetation, and the green shoots of early water plants. More interesting are the traces of animals that have been using the water corridor, deer coming to drink at dawn and dusk, smaller predators hunting along the margins, and other bears who have recognized the same opportunities you're evaluating. The current's power becomes apparent as you watch debris flow past. Entire trees, uprooted from upstream slopes by the force of melting snow, tumble in the brown water like twigs. Ice chunks from higher elevations bump and grind against each other, creating a percussion section that adds to the water's roar. This is not a stream you can casually wade across. It's a force that demands careful evaluation before any interaction. But the edges tell a different story. Where the main current has backed up behind natural dams or spread into side channels, calmer pools provide access to the resources you need. In these quieter areas, the water runs clearer, allowing you to spot movement beneath the surface. More importantly, these are the areas where early insects begin their spring activity, where water plants send up their first shoots, where small fish might venture from their winter hiding places. Your first approach to the water's edge requires careful footing. The soil, saturated with snowmelt and recent rain, gives way unpredictably under your weight. Each step must be tested before committing your full mass to it. The reward for caution comes quickly. A small pool cut off from the main current by a beaver dam reveals several fish, probably trout that have been trapped by the rapidly changing water levels. The fishing technique required here differs completely from the salmon runs of late summer. These are small, quick fish in shallow water, requiring precision rather than power. You wade in slowly, movement deliberate to avoid spooking your prey. Your paws, surprisingly dexterous for their size, work through the gravel bottom while your eyes track the fish movement patterns. The first successful catch provides more satisfaction than a small trout, that nonetheless represents success in the delicate business of extracting food from moving water. The fish's flesh, clean and fresh, offers proteins your system processes easily. More importantly, the success builds confidence for more ambitious fishing attempts as water levels stabilize and fish behavior becomes more predictable. Vegetation along the swollen waterway presents the season's first significant plant food opportunities. Skunk cabbage pushes up through the wet soil, its broad leaves rich in nutrients, despite requiring careful preparation to neutralize their natural irritants. Wild onions sprout in patches of disturbed earth, their bulbs providing carbohydrates, and their greens adding variety to your largely protein-based spring diet. The expanded stream banks also reveal winter casualties, animals that didn't survive the cold months and are now exposed by receding snow and shifting water. A deer carcass, partially buried in stream sediment, provides the kind of windfall protein that can fuel several days of territory exploration. Your nose tells you the meat is still good, despite months of cold preservation, though you'll need to compete with ravens, crows, and smaller scavengers who have already discovered this resource. Reading water becomes critical to your spring survival strategy. Fast-moving sections carry away potential food, but are too dangerous to approach closely. Quiet backwaters accumulate both nutrients and the organisms that feed on them. Side channels that flood during high water but calm as levels drop create temporary fishing opportunities. Your growing knowledge of these patterns will guide your movements throughout the active season. The sound environment around flowing water masks other forest noises that normally provide critical information. Approaching predators or competitors might be undetectable over the water's roar until they're dangerously close. This acoustic masking requires heightened vigilance when foraging near the stream, constant attention to visual and scent cues that replace your temporarily compromised hearing. Other animals share your interest in the newly active waterway. Fresh deer tracks in the soft bank sediment show where ungulates come to drink. Smaller predator tracks fox, marten, possibly lynx indicate hunting activity along the stream margins. Most significantly, other bear tracks appear in the muddy areas, some fresh enough to suggest you're not the only one who has recognized this area's potential. The water's chemistry tells stories about the upstream drainage. Runoff from different elevation zones carries distinct mineral signatures, the clean, sharp taste of snowmelt from alpine zones mixing with the earthier flavors of water that has percolated through soil and vegetation. These taste differences help you map the watershed in your mind, understanding which tributaries might offer the best fishing or foraging opportunities as the season progresses. Territory edges and invisible borders. The forest holds its secrets in scent and sign, invisible boundaries that govern the complex social structure of bear society. As you move through your traditional range, every tree trunk, every rock outcrop, every stream crossing carries messages left by others of your kind. Reading these communications accurately could mean the difference between peaceful coexistence and dangerous confrontation in a season where every calorie must be carefully preserved. A pine tree at the junction of two game trails bears the unmistakable marks of bear traffic. Claw scratches reach high on the trunk, their depth and spacing telling you about the size and strength of the animals who made them. Your own marks from previous years are still visible, weathered but recognizable. Above them, fresher scratches indicate another bear has been actively maintaining territorial claims in this area. The scent story proves more complex than the visual evidence. Rubbing your nose against the scarred bark, you detect the chemical signatures of at least 3 different bears. One is clearly a large male, his musky scent heavy with the testosterone that marks him as a breeding adult and potential competitor. Another signature belongs to a female, possibly one with cubs based on the stress hormones mixed with her normal scent markers. The third trail is fainter, perhaps a younger bear who passes through this area but doesn't claim it as core territory. Scat analysis provides additional intelligence about your neighbor's activities and health status. Fresh bear droppings along the trail contain plant materials you recognize: early spring greens, insect fragments, and the bones of small mammals. The digestive efficiency shown in these samples suggests healthy animals who are successfully making the transition from winter dormancy to active foraging. Competitors certainly, but not desperate ones who might take dangerous risks. Your response to these territorial messages must be calculated carefully. Marking over another bear's scent post sends a clear message of challenge, appropriate only if you're prepared to defend the claim through confrontation if necessary. In your current condition, strong enough to maintain your traditional range, but not ready for serious fighting, selective marking makes more sense. You choose trees at the edges of overlap zones, places where your presence is expected, but not directly threatening. The invisible boundaries shift with the seasons and the individual bears who create them. A female with new cubs will claim a much larger area than she defended while solitary, her protective instincts extending the radius of potentially dangerous encounters. An aging male might contract his territorial claims as younger, stronger bears test his ability to maintain dominance. These changes require constant monitoring and adjustment of your movement patterns. Stream crossings become particularly important territorial markers. The ford where you traditionally cross the main creek shows sign of recent bear traffic tracks in the soft bank sediment, hair caught on branches at bear height. and the characteristic indentations where large paws have gripped rocks for stability. Other bears have been using this crossing regularly, making it a potential flashpoint for territorial disputes. The economics of territory defense govern your response to territorial intrusions. A yearling bear passing through your range represents minimal threat and might be ignored or merely discouraged with a brief display. A mature male actively marking trees and establishing food caches poses a serious challenge that might require direct confrontation. Reading the intent behind territorial signs helps you choose appropriate responses. Overlapping territories create complex zones where multiple bears might have legitimate claims. These areas, often the richest in food resources, require careful navigation. Your approach becomes more cautious, more alert to fresh sign that might indicate another bear's immediate presence. The goal is to access resources without triggering confrontation, timing your visits to minimize encounters with competitors. Seasonal territories add another layer of complexity to the invisible boundaries. Areas that are unimportant during spring might become critical during berry season or salmon runs. Your mental map must account for these temporal changes, understanding which zones will become contested as the season progresses and which can be safely visited now but should be avoided later. Scent posts serve as bulletin boards in the bear communication network. By depositing your own chemical signatures and reading those left by others, you participate in a complex social system that reduces dangerous encounters while maintaining access to necessary resources. The information exchange works both ways. Your presence is noted by others just as theirs is registered by you. The female with cubs presents a special territorial challenge. Her protective instincts make her potentially more dangerous than a male competitor, and her need for secure foraging areas may bring her into conflict with your established routes. Reading her sign carefully, the spacing of tracks that indicates whether cubs are present, the stress markers in her scent that suggest her current mood, the freshness of markings that shows how recently she passed through, becomes crucial for avoiding dangerous encounters. Buffer zones develop naturally between established territories, areas where bears might travel, but where none maintains strong claims. These corridors become important for young bears seeking their own territories and for established animals accessing seasonal resources. Understanding and respecting these neutral zones helps maintain the delicate balance that allows multiple large predators to coexist in overlapping ranges. Old scars, new strategies, survival memory. Your body carries the history of previous springs in patterns of healed tissue and hard-won wisdom. The scar along your left shoulder, a memento from a territorial dispute 3 seasons ago, pulls slightly as you stretch to mark a boundary tree. Each mark on your hide represents a lesson learned, a mistake survived, a successful adaptation to the harsh realities of wilderness life. Now, in your 4th year of adult territory ownership, those experiences guide every decision. The failed salmon run of 2 years past taught you never to depend on a single abundant food source. That season, late spring weather delayed the fish migration until after you'd expended precious energy positioning yourself at the traditional fishing spots. While other bears grew desperate and took dangerous risks, you'd already begun developing backup strategies, knowing multiple berry patches at different elevations, mapping alternative protein sources, maintaining mental catalogs of reliable fallback options. Memory guides you now toward a hidden valley where avalanche activity has created unique foraging opportunities. The massive snowslide that occurred during your 2nd winter initially seemed like pure destruction. Mature trees snapped like matchsticks, soil stripped down to bedrock, the entire ecosystem apparently ruined. But subsequent visits revealed nature's remarkable ability to turn catastrophe into opportunity. The disturbed soil proved perfect for early wildflowers. The fallen timber created habitat for grub-producing insects, and the opened canopy allowed different plant communities to establish themselves. Your mental map of the territory has evolved through years of systematic exploration and seasonal observation. that promising game trail that seemed to lead toward good hunting grounds. It dead ends at an impassable cliff face, but the detour route you discovered leads to a hidden spring where animals concentrate during dry periods. The berry patch that produced abundantly during your first adult season, a late freeze damaged the bushes, but you've identified 3 alternative sites at different elevations that fruit at slightly different times. Last year's encounter with the aggressive female changed your approach to territorial boundaries permanently. She'd been defending cubs, and her attack came without the usual preliminary displays that signal aggressive intent. The wounds healed, but the memory altered your behavior patterns. Now you pay more attention to subtle scent markers that indicate reproductive status, approach potential conflict zones more cautiously, and maintain better awareness of escape routes when exploring unfamiliar areas. The drought conditions 2 seasons ago provided harsh lessons about water conservation and travel efficiency. Stream beds that had never failed in your memory ran completely dry, forcing dangerous journeys to distant water sources. You learn to read landscape clues that indicate underground water, the vegetation patterns that suggest hidden springs, the rock formations that collect and hold moisture, the animal trails that converge on reliable water sources. This knowledge now influences your territory use patterns and seasonal movement strategies. Fire scars from your second adult season initially seemed like pure disaster. The lightning-sparked blaze burned through your best foraging areas, destroying familiar landmarks and disrupting established food sources. But the post-fire recovery created some of your most productive hunting grounds. Burned areas attracted different prey species, created ideal conditions for certain plant foods, and opened sightlines that improved your ability to detect both opportunities and threats. What seemed like territorial loss became territorial enhancement. Your approach to human encounters has evolved through trial and sometimes dangerous error. Early in your territorial tenure, curiosity led you too close to campsites and hiking trails. One near miss with an aggressive human group taught you to maintain greater distances, to retreat immediately upon detecting human scent rather than investigating further. You've learned to read the seasonal patterns of human activity, knowing which areas to avoid during hunting seasons, which trails see heavy summer traffic, and where food storage violations create dangerous attractant situations. The harsh winter that nearly killed you during your 3rd year fundamentally changed your autumn preparation strategies. That season taught you the critical importance of maximizing late-season fat accumulation, of selecting den sites with better thermal properties, and of timing the entry into hibernation to balance fat conservation with the risk of being caught in dangerous early storms. The memory of waking that spring barely alive drives your current attention to energy balance and risk assessment. Successful foraging techniques have been refined through years of practice and occasional failure. The method for extracting maximum nutrition from ant colonies, the timing required for raiding bird nests without endangering yourself, the water conditions that make fishing most productive. All of these skills represent accumulated experience, rather than instinct. Each technique has been tested, modified, and perfected through repetition and adaptation. Your understanding of seasonal timing has become increasingly sophisticated. The sequence of food availability, which plants emerge first, when insect activity peaks, how weather patterns affect prey behavior, represents a complex ecological calendar, maintained entirely in memory. This temporal knowledge allows you to position yourself efficiently, to anticipate feeding opportunities, and to make energy expenditure decisions based on reliable predictions about future food availability. The network of relationships with other territorial animals has stabilized into a complex but predictable pattern. You know which competitors are likely to back down from confrontation, which represent serious threats requiring avoidance, and which might be tolerant of limited territorial overlap. This social intelligence reduces the energy wasted on unnecessary conflicts, while ensuring you maintain access to critical resources. Weather pattern recognition has become increasingly accurate through years of observation. The atmospheric conditions that precede major storms, the wind directions that bring different weather systems, the seasonal timing of dangerous weather events all contribute to decisions about when to seek shelter, when to risk long-distance travel, and when to focus on intensive foraging before conditions deteriorate. Early spring protein, moose calves, ground squirrels. The scent trail tells a story of vulnerability and opportunity. Fresh moose tracks in the muddy soil near the creek crossing include the smaller impressions of a newborn calf, its hooves barely larger than your front claws. The mother's gait pattern shows the characteristic, careful placement of an animal burdened with protecting helpless young. For a bear emerging from winter with depleted fat reserves, few opportunities represent better potential return on energy investment than newborn ungulates. But hunting moose calves requires careful calculation of risk versus reward. An adult cow moose stands as tall as a small horse, weighs 3 times what you do, and possesses front hooves that can shatter bones with a single strike. Her maternal instincts during the first weeks after birth transform her into one of the forest's most dangerous adversaries. The protein payoff from a successful hunt could fuel weeks of territory establishment, but failure could result in injuries that compromise your entire active season. You follow the trail at a respectful distance, reading the story written in tracks and scent. The cow has been feeding systematically on emerging vegetation, her path meandering between patches of early browse, but never straying far from thick cover where her calf can remain hidden. Her track spacing shows controlled movement, rather than panic. She's alert, but not yet aware of your presence. The wind direction becomes critical now. Your approach must keep your scent from reaching the moose, while allowing their scent to reach you. Moving in a wide circle around their projected location, you work to position yourself downwind where you can assess the situation without triggering their flight response. The forest floor, still soft with snowmelt and spring moisture, muffles your footsteps but requires careful placement to avoid snapping twigs or dislodging rocks. A clear view reveals the tactical situation. The cow stands in a small clearing, systematically stripping buds from willow branches, while her calf lies hidden in a patch of thick brush 20 feet away. Her ears constantly scan for threats, rotating independently to monitor different directions simultaneously. Her position gives her clear sight lines in all directions, except the dense thicket where her offspring waits motionless. The calf represents perhaps 60 pounds of high-quality protein and fat, more nutrition than you're likely to obtain from weeks of careful foraging on insects and plant materials. But accessing that resource requires separating it from a vigilant mother who outweighs you by several hundred pounds and possesses both the motivation and weaponry to inflict serious damage. The ethical calculation contains no moral dimension. Predator and prey relationships are governed by opportunity and capability rather than sentiment. Your hunting strategy must account for the cow's likely response patterns. A direct approach will trigger immediate defensive behavior, probably a charge intended to drive you away from the calf's location. Circling toward the calf might provoke a more sustained attack, as the mother interprets your movement as a direct threat to her offspring. The successful approach requires patience, positioning, and perfect timing to create a brief opportunity when the calf is vulnerable, but the mother is temporarily unable to intervene. Ground squirrels present a completely different hunting equation. Their colonial burrow systems dot the meadow edges where early grasses provide abundant food. Each individual squirrel represents perhaps half a pound of meat, but their colonies can include dozens of animals in a relatively small area. More importantly, their predictable behavior patterns and escape routes create opportunities for multiple captures in a single hunting session. The squirrel hunting technique requires different skills than pursuing large prey. Speed matters more than stealth, timing more than strength. The squirrel's alarm system means that once you reveal your presence, you'll have only minutes before the entire colony retreats underground. Success depends on identifying the most productive areas within the colony, positioning yourself for maximum effectiveness and executing a systematic hunting pattern that capitalizes on initial confusion. You approach the squirrel meadow during their peak activity period, when individuals are spread across the available foraging area rather than concentrated near burrow entrances. Your first rush targets the animals furthest from safety, using your superior speed over short distances to reach them before they can escape underground. The technique is exhausting, but effective. 3 squirrels captured in the first 2 minutes of activity. The remaining colony members have now retreated to their burrows, but ground squirrel behavior includes regular emergence to check for danger. By remaining motionless near the burrow complex, you can wait for individuals to venture far enough from safety to become vulnerable to another quick rush. This patience-based approach yields slower returns, but extends the hunting session beyond the initial surprise attack. Excavating occupied burrows represents another hunting option, though one that requires significant energy expenditure. The squirrel's tunnel systems extend several feet underground, often with multiple entrances and emergency exits. Digging them out burns calories rapidly but can yield multiple animals from a single burrow complex. The decision depends on your current energy balance and the availability of alternative food sources. Both hunting strategies require constant awareness of larger predators who might view your activity as opportunity for food theft or territorial challenge. The scent of fresh meat, especially from the protein-rich organs of newly killed prey, can attract competitors from considerable distances. Your success as a hunter must be balanced against your vulnerability while feeding and the need to cache or consume your catches quickly. The moose scenario develops while you're processing your squirrel catches. The cow has moved closer to her calf's hiding spot, possibly in response to some subtle threat signal you haven't detected. Her body language shows increased tension, ears forward, head raised, nostrils flaring as she tests the wind for danger signs. The window for approaching her calf safely may be closing rapidly. A mature hunting decision emerges from weighing immediate needs against long-term survival strategy. The squirrels provide sufficient protein to meet your current requirements without the extreme risks associated with challenging a protective moose cow. As tempting as the larger prey appears, wisdom gained through previous seasons suggests that patient, lower-risk hunting strategies build strength more reliably than dramatic gambles that could result in serious injury. The human scent trail, curiosity versus caution. The smell hits you like a wall-sharp chemical, utterly unlike anything produced by the natural world. Synthetic fabrics, processed foods, soap, deodorant, and underneath it all, the distinctive musky odor of human skin and breath. The scent trail is fresh, probably less than 6 hours old, and it follows the game trail you'd plan to use for accessing the lower valley foraging areas. Your initial response is automatic freeze, test the wind, scan for immediate threats. Humans represent the most unpredictable element in your territory, capable of behavior ranging from harmless observation to lethal aggression. Unlike other predators whose actions follow comprehensible patterns, humans operate according to rules you've never fully decoded. Some flee immediately upon detecting your presence, others stand their ground and make loud noises, and a dangerous few actively pursue encounters. The trail tells multiple stories simultaneously. Boot prints in soft earth show at least 2 individuals, possibly 3, traveling together at a steady pace rather than the stop-and-go pattern of active hunting or foraging. Their track spacing indicates casual walking rather than stalking or fleeing. Food odors clinging to the scent trail suggest they're carrying provisions trail mix, energy bars, something with a strong peanut butter component. Curiosity wars with caution as you follow the human trail at a safe distance. These particular humans have been traveling through quality bear habitat for several hours, apparently unaware of the signs of your presence they've been passing. Claw marks on trees, scat deposits, the distinctive digging patterns where you excavated ant colonies, yesterday all ignored or unrecognized by the passing humans. Their camping equipment odors suggest overnight visitors rather than day hikers. Sleeping bags, camp stove fuel, and the distinctive smell of nylon tents indicate they're planning to establish a temporary territory overlap with your own. The location they're likely to choose a flat area near water with good visibility sits directly along your planned route to several important foraging areas. The ethical dimensions of human encounters have shifted dramatically during your territorial tenure. Early interactions taught you that humans vary enormously in their threat potential and behavioral predictability. Some carry the acrid scent of firearms and move with the purposeful gait of hunters. Others smell of cameras and sunscreen, showing more interest in observation than confrontation. A few carry food odors so concentrated they represent serious temptation despite the risks of human contact. Your approach strategy balances information gathering with safety maintenance. Staying downwind and using available cover, you trail the humans toward their likely camping destination. The intelligence you gather now will determine your movement patterns for the next several days. If they've chosen a site that blocks access to critical resources, you'll need to modify your foraging plans significantly. If their presence is temporary and non-threatening, minimal route adjustments might suffice. The humans have stopped frequently, their scent pooling in areas where they pause to rest or examine something that caught their attention. At one such stop, the ground holds clear evidence of their priorities. They spent time photographing a wildflower meadow, judging by the trampled grass patterns and the lingering scent of camera equipment. The behavior suggests wildlife tourists rather than hunters or researchers. Food storage odors create the most serious concern about human camping. The smells emanating from their packs include not just trail food, but strongly scented items that could create dangerous attractant situations. Bacon, cheese, chocolate, and other processed foods produce odor signatures that can draw bears from miles away. If these humans fail to store their food properly, their campsite could become a focal point for dangerous human-bear interactions. Your past experience with human food has been decidedly mixed. One memorable encounter with carelessly stored camping supplies provided days' worth of high-calorie nutrition, but led to uncomfortable associations between human scent and food rewards. Learning to resist that association required conscious effort and several seasons of disciplined avoidance. The caloric density of human food makes it almost irresistibly attractive to a bear managing energy balance on natural forage. The human's travel pace suggests they're not entirely comfortable in bear country. Their frequent stops, loud conversations, and tendency to bunch together indicate awareness of potential wildlife encounters. This wariness might actually work in your favor. Cautious humans are more likely to store food properly, make enough noise to avoid surprise encounters, and retreat appropriately if they detect your presence. Reading human intent through scent and sign has become increasingly sophisticated through years of territorial overlap. The stress hormones present in human scent vary significantly based on their comfort level and experience in wilderness environments. Confident, experienced outdoors, people produce different chemical signatures than nervous first-time visitors. Understanding these differences helps predict human behavior and choose appropriate response strategies. The camping location they eventually choose creates a significant territorial complication. Their site sits directly adjacent to your primary creek crossing, blocking access to the deer carcass you've been feeding on intermittently for the past 3 days. More problematically, their presence will certainly alert the carcass to other scavengers, potentially creating a competitive feeding situation that could escalate beyond your ability to manage safely. Weather patterns suggest these humans might be planning an extended stay. The atmospheric conditions show several days of stable weather, ahead ideal for camping, but problematic for your territorial use patterns. If they establish a semi-permanent presence in this key area, you'll need to develop alternative routes to your seasonal foraging areas or risk increasingly dangerous human encounters. The decision matrix governing your response to human presence has evolved through multiple seasons of experience. Immediate retreat ensures safety, but might mean abandoning access to critical resources. Continued monitoring allows better assessment of the human's intentions and duration, but risks detection and potential conflict. Active discouragement, making your presence known through scent marking or distant visual contact, might encourage the humans to relocate, but could also trigger unpredictable responses. Rains, mud, and itching fur maintenance mode. The first drops arrive without warning. Despite the atmospheric pressure changes, your sensitive inner ear has been tracking all morning. What begins as scattered plops on the forest canopy quickly intensifies into the steady drumming of a spring downpour. Within minutes, water streams from every surface, transforming the forest floor into a network of temporary streams and rapidly expanding mud pools. Your winter coat, so perfectly adapted for cold weather insulation, becomes a liability in the rain. The dense undercoat that trapped warm air during hibernation now traps water against your skin, creating a heavy, sodden mass that restricts movement and conducts heat away from your body. Each step squelches through increasingly muddy terrain, your paws collecting pounds of sticky clay that must be scraped off against rocks and logs. Seeking shelter becomes an immediate priority, but options are limited in this transitional season. The thick canopy that provides some protection from light rain proves inadequate against the heavy droplets that penetrate even mature coniferous forest. Rock overhangs offer better protection but are often already occupied by smaller animals seeking the same refuge. You settle for a position under a massive fallen log, its elevated trunk creating a narrow, dry zone where you can wait out the worst of the downpour. The rain transforms the forest soundscape completely. The gentle murmur of routine forest activity disappears under the percussion of water hitting leaves, branches, and earth. This acoustic masking creates both opportunities and vulnerabilities. Prey animals might be less alert to your approach, but potential threats could also move undetected in your vicinity. Your other senses must compensate for the temporary compromise of your hearing. But the rain also brings unexpected benefits. The moisture releases scent molecules that have been locked in dry vegetation and soil, creating a rich olfactory environment that provides detailed information about recent animal activity in your area. Territorial markings left by other bears become more pronounced in the humid air. The trails of prey species, previously faint, now carry clear chemical signatures that map their movement patterns with unusual precision. Water management becomes a conscious concern as the rain intensifies. Despite the apparent abundance of water everywhere, most of it runs off too quickly to be useful for drinking, carrying sediment and debris that makes it unsuitable for consumption. Finding clean water sources, areas where rain collects without picking up excessive dirt or contamination, requires careful selection and sometimes significant travel to access. Your fur begins the inevitable process of matting as the rain continues. The combination of water, natural oils, and forest debris creates tangles that will require extensive grooming to resolve. More concerning is the potential for parasites to thrive in the warm, humid environment created by your wet coat. Ticks, fleas, and other external parasites become more active in these conditions, requiring increased vigilance and preventive measures. A natural mud wallow created by the expanding rain pools presents an opportunity for proactive parasite control. The clay-rich mud, when applied thoroughly to your coat, creates an environment hostile to many external parasites while providing relief from the itching that accompanies heavy shedding of winter fur. Rolling in the mud feels immediately satisfying, the cool clay soothing irritated skin, while the abrasive texture helps dislodge loose hair and debris. The mud application must be systematic to be effective. Starting with your back and sides, you roll methodically to ensure complete coverage of accessible areas. The mud's consistency requires careful evaluation. Too thin, and it provides no lasting benefit. Too thick, and it becomes a burden that restricts movement. The ideal mud coating creates a temporary protective layer that will gradually wear off as it dries, taking parasites and loose fur with it. Grooming activities intensify in response to the rain's effects on your coat condition. Tree trunks with rough bark become essential grooming tools, allowing you to scratch areas you cannot reach directly while helping to distribute the mud coating evenly. The rhythmic rubbing against appropriately textured surfaces provides both physical relief and psychological satisfaction, a meditative activity that helps pass time during weather that limits other activities. The rain's impact on your territory extends beyond immediate comfort concerns. Stream crossings become more dangerous as water levels rise and currents increase. Game trails turn into muddy channels that retain clear tracks but become difficult to navigate. Food sources are affected differently. Some become more accessible as the rain softens hard soil around root vegetables, while others are washed away or contaminated by runoff. Scent marking activities must be adjusted for rain conditions. The traditional trees and rocks you use for territorial communication become less effective as rain washes away chemical signals almost as quickly as you can deposit them. Alternative marking strategies might include selecting more sheltered locations or timing marking activities for brief breaks in the precipitation, when your scent deposits might persist longer. Energy conservation becomes particularly important during extended rain periods. The additional calories required to maintain body temperature in wet conditions must be balanced against the reduced foraging opportunities created by poor visibility and dangerous travel conditions. Finding ways to remain active enough to meet nutritional needs while avoiding the energy drain of constant exposure to rain and cold requires careful planning. Temperature regulation presents ongoing challenges as the rain continues. Your core body temperature remains stable, but extremities, particularly your ears and the pads of your feet, become increasingly cold as wet conditions persist. Alternating periods of activity and rest helps maintain circulation while preventing the exhaustion that can result from sustained effort in adverse conditions. The rain eventually passes, leaving behind a transformed landscape where every surface gleams with moisture and the air carries the rich, earthy smell of wet forest. Your mud coating has begun to dry and crack, creating an itchy shell that must be systematically removed through grooming and abrasion against rough surfaces. But beneath the temporary discomfort lies the satisfaction of having weathered another spring storm while maintaining your health and territorial position. Rut signals in the wind mating season begins. The chemical message arrives on a warm afternoon breeze, subtle at first, but unmistakably significant. Your nostrils flare as you test the air more carefully, isolating the complex scent signature from the background forest odors. Estrus, the distinctive hormone blend that signals a receptive female somewhere upwind, probably within a few miles of your current position. Every cell in your body responds to this information with an urgency that has been building since your emergence from winter hibernation. Your behavioral patterns shift immediately and dramatically. The careful, methodical foraging that has governed your spring activities becomes secondary to the driving need to locate and assess this breeding opportunity. Energy conservation, so critical during the early season recovery period, now must be balanced against the biological imperative that defines evolutionary success. The transformation from survival mode to reproductive mode happens as quickly as flipping a switch. Following the scent trail requires systematic wind analysis and strategic positioning. The female's location shifts constantly as she moves through her territory, and atmospheric conditions scatter her chemical signals in complex patterns that must be decoded through patient sampling. You begin a wide circling pattern, using elevation changes and wind currents to map the approximate boundaries of her range, while avoiding direct intrusion that might trigger defensive behavior. The scent tells you more than just location and availability. This female is mature, probably in her prime breeding years based on the hormone concentrations in her trail. Her stress levels appear moderately alert, but not panicked, suggesting she's experienced with the mating process. Most importantly, the chemical signature indicates she's been in estrus for several days, but likely has not yet bred successfully, creating a window of opportunity for courting behavior. But the scent trail also carries warnings. Other males have been investigating this female's range. Their territorial markings become increasingly frequent as you move toward her core area, some fresh enough to indicate active competition. The size and intensity of these rival claims suggest at least 2 other mature males are aware of this breeding opportunity. Competition will be inevitable, and the stakes justify significant risk. Your physical condition becomes critically important now. The winter weight loss and spring recovery period have left you strong enough for normal territorial maintenance, but perhaps not optimal for the intense competition that characterizes bear breeding. Assessing your fighting capability honestly, you recognize that while you're competitive with most rivals, encounters with the largest dominant males might require strategic retreat rather than direct confrontation. The female's behavioral patterns emerge through careful observation from a respectful distance. She's feeding systematically, but with obvious distraction, frequently pausing to test the air for approaching males. Her movement patterns show the restless energy characteristic of estrus females, covering more ground than normal foraging would require. She's actively scent marking, leaving chemical messages that will draw potential mates while advertising her availability. Other males begin to converge on the area as the day progresses. You detect the arrival of a younger male from the east, his inexperienced approach creating enough noise and disturbance to alert every animal in the vicinity. From the west comes the scent signature of a larger, more mature competitor whose territorial markings you've encountered throughout the season. The competitive dynamics are forming rapidly, requiring careful tactical planning. The first rival encounter happens sooner than expected. The younger male, apparently following the same scent trail you've been tracking, emerges from thick cover barely 50 yards away. His body language shows the nervous aggression of an animal driven by hormones, but lacking the experience to manage competitive encounters effectively. His posturing is exaggerated, attempting to appear larger and more threatening than his actual size and fighting ability justify. Your response must communicate strength while avoiding unnecessary escalation. Standing tall, you display your true size while keeping your posture controlled rather than actively aggressive. The message is clear: you're not intimidated by his presence, but you're not looking for a fight unless he forces the issue. The younger male reads the situation correctly, backing down after several minutes of mutual assessment and moving off to seek alternative opportunities. The larger male from the Western Territory presents a more serious challenge. His approach is confident and methodical, showing none of the nervous energy displayed by the younger competitor. When he finally comes into view, his size confirms what his scent signature suggested. He outweighs you by perhaps 100 pounds and carries himself with the assurance of an animal accustomed to winning territorial disputes. The female's response to the increasing male presence becomes increasingly agitated. Rather than selecting among her suitors, she seems to be evaluating whether the competitive tension might escalate into dangerous fighting that could threaten her safety. Her scent markings take on stress hormones that suggest she's considering relocating to avoid the developing confrontation. Breeding strategy must now account for multiple variables: the female's receptivity and preferences, the competitive pressure from rival males, the energy costs of sustained courtship behavior, and the risk of injury that could compromise your territorial holdings throughout the rest of the active season. The biological drive to breed remains powerful, but survival wisdom accumulated over previous seasons provides counterbalancing caution. The dominant male's territorial displays escalate as he becomes aware of your presence. His claw marks on nearby trees reach higher than yours, advertising superior size and strength. His scent markings become increasingly aggressive, the chemical signature carrying stress hormones and territorial challenges that demand response. The confrontation phase of this breeding competition appears inevitable. Your strategic options narrow as the competitive situation develops. Direct competition with the larger male carries significant injury risk, but might be necessary to access the female. Attempting to court the female while avoiding confrontation might prove impossible given the small territory involved and the dominant male's apparent intention to monopolize access. Alternative strategies might include waiting for the competitors to exhaust themselves or seeking other breeding opportunities elsewhere in your range. Dance of approach. Courtship without words. The female has chosen a meadow clearing for her morning foraging, a decision that creates both opportunity and exposure for your courtship approach. From your concealed position at the forest edge, you can observe her behavior patterns while remaining largely undetected. She moves with the characteristic restlessness of estrus, feeding intermittently but spending more time scent marking and testing the air for approaching males than focusing on nutrition. Your approach must balance persistence with respect for her comfort zone. Too aggressive, and she'll flee or become defensive. Too passive, and rival males will monopolize her attention. The courtship dance requires reading subtle behavioral quassia position, body angle, tail movement, scent marking frequency to gauge her receptivity to closer contact. Each step forward must be earned through demonstrated restraint and appropriate social signals. The initial approach covers perhaps 50 yards over the course of an hour. Movement must appear non-threatening, while clearly communicating your intent. You graze casually at the meadow's edge, gradually working closer while avoiding direct eye contact that might be interpreted as aggressive challenge. Your own scent marking becomes more frequent, depositing chemical messages that advertise your presence, health, and breeding condition. She notices your presence long before acknowledging it directly. Her feeding patterns shift to keep you in peripheral vision while maintaining escape routes to dense cover. The frequency of her scent testing increases, analyzing the hormone levels in your trail to assess your size, age, fighting ability, and current stress levels. This chemical conversation provides more detailed information than visual observation alone could supply. The first direct acknowledgement comes through body language rather than vocalization. She pauses in her feeding, turns slightly in your direction, and holds the position for several seconds before resuming activity. The signal is subtle, but unmistakable. She's aware of your courtship intent and hasn't rejected it immediately. Permission to continue the approach, though withdrawal of that permission could happen at any moment. Your response must be calibrated perfectly. Too much enthusiasm might be interpreted as aggression or desperation. Too little, and she might lose interest or assume you lack the confidence necessary for successful breeding. You continue the gradual approach, pausing frequently to demonstrate your ability to control your impulses while maintaining enough forward progress to show serious intent. The meadow becomes a stage where every movement carries meaning. She begins moving in patterns that seem random, but actually test your ability to read and respond to her signals, leading you toward areas with good visibility tests, whether you're trying to ambush or genuinely court her. Moving toward escape routes evaluates your respect for her comfort and safety. Each test requires appropriate response to maintain her interest. Rival males complicate the courtship dance significantly. The younger male from yesterday's encounter appears at the meadow's far edge, his presence immediately detected by both you and the female. His inexperienced approach lacks subtlety, moving too directly and too quickly toward the female. Her response is immediate retreat toward thicker cover, ending the morning's courtship progress and forcing you to begin the careful approach process again. Competition intensifies the urgency of successful courtship. The female's estrus period will last only a few days, and each interruption by rivals reduces your opportunities for building the trust necessary for breeding. Time pressure conflicts with the patience required for proper courtship, creating a tactical challenge that requires constant adjustment between advancing your position and maintaining appropriate behavior. The female's testing becomes more sophisticated as courtship progresses. She begins feeding in locations that require you to cross open ground, exposing yourself to potential rivals while demonstrating your commitment to pursuing her. She varies her movement speed, forcing you to adjust your following distance to maintain optimal spacing. Each test successfully passed appears to increase her acceptance of your presence. Physical displays become part of the courtship repertoire as the relationship develops. You demonstrate your size and strength through controlled movements, standing tall to show your shoulder height, stepping over fallen logs to display leg length, rubbing against trees to leave scent marks at maximum reach. These displays advertise your genetic fitness without directing aggression toward the female. The female's own displays provide information about her condition and preferences. Her choice of scent marking locations indicates her territory, familiarity, and resource access. Her movement efficiency suggests her health and energy levels. Her responses to your displays reveal her assessment of your suitability as a breeding partner. Reading these signals accurately becomes critical for timing the final approach phases. Patience proves to be the most important courtship skill. The female's comfort level with your presence increases gradually over several days of careful interaction. Rushing the process would trigger flight responses that could end the courtship permanently. Instead, each successful interaction builds toward increased tolerance for closer proximity. The courtship becomes an exercise in delayed gratification, where restraint ultimately enables success. The breakthrough comes late on the third day of courtship. The female, after testing your behavior through dozens of small interactions, finally allows you to approach within arm's length while she feeds. Her body language shows relaxed awareness rather than defensive tension. She continues feeding normally despite your proximity, indicating a level of trust that makes breeding possible. Environmental factors influence the courtship timeline significantly. Weather conditions affect scent dispersal, visibility, and the female's movement patterns. The presence of other animal spray species that might provide feeding opportunities, predators that could threaten safety, or human activity that might disrupt the process all require tactical adjustments to maintain courtship progress. The female's final acceptance signals come through increasingly intimate behaviors. She allows closer approach during feeding, doesn't retreat when you engage in parallel scent marking, and begins incorporating your presence into her normal activity patterns rather than treating you as a disruption. These subtle changes indicate the transition from courtship to potential breeding acceptance. Territory becomes a crucial factor in successful courtship completion. The female requires safe, familiar areas where breeding can occur without interruption from rivals or other threats. Your knowledge of secure locations within her range, combined with your ability to guide her toward them without appearing controlling, becomes essential for completing the courtship process successfully. Aftermath of mating energy. Rebuild. The exhaustion hits like a physical weight settling across your shoulders and back. 3 days of intense courtship, followed by the brief but energetically demanding mating, has drained reserves you could barely afford to expend. Your muscles ache with the deep fatigue that follows sustained high-stress activity, and your normally sharp alertness has dulled to the point where simple decisions require conscious effort. The female departed within hours of mating, her behavior shifting immediately from acceptance to wariness as hormonal changes began altering her priorities. Her abrupt departure, while expected based on previous breeding experiences, still triggers a brief sense of loss that conflicts with the biological satisfaction of successful reproduction. The territorial overlap you shared for several days has dissolved back into separate ranges with invisible boundaries. Your left shoulder throbs with each movement, a reminder of the confrontation with the larger rival male that nearly ended your courtship hopes. The fight lasted only minutes, but involved enough grappling and striking to leave you with several deep scratches and extensive bruising. The wounds are clean and show no signs of infection, but they represent energy debt calories that must go toward healing rather than fat accumulation or territory maintenance. Foraging becomes simultaneously more urgent and more difficult. Your depleted energy reserves demand immediate replenishment, but your injuries limit mobility and reduce hunting efficiency. The careful stalking required for protein capture becomes painful when shoulder movement sends sharp reminders of recent combat. Plant foods, easier to obtain but less energy dense, must carry more of the nutritional load during recovery. A promising ant colony discovered during the pre-breeding territory expansion offers the kind of high-protein, low-effort food source your current condition requires. The insects are active in the warming soil, their colonies thriving in the late spring abundance. Excavating their nests requires careful digging that favors your uninjured right side, while producing steady returns of fat-rich larvae and adult ants. Sleep patterns require adjustment during the recovery period. Your normal alternation between feeding and resting must shift toward longer rest periods that allow damaged muscle tissue to repair. Finding secure resting spots becomes more critical when your alertness is compromised by exhaustion. The dense thicket you select for a temporary daybed offers concealment from both competitors and potential threats. Scent trail analysis reveals the movements of other bears in your vicinity, including the lingering traces of your recent rivals. The larger male who inflicted your shoulder wounds has moved east toward another female's territory, his scent signature carrying the same hormonal urgency that drove your recent courtship. The younger male appears to have settled into a pattern of long-distance scouting, probably seeking breeding opportunities without direct competition. Water becomes particularly important during the recovery phase. Dehydration compounds fatigue and slows healing, while the physical act of drinking provides opportunities to assess your condition through reflection in calm pool surfaces. The creek crossing you've been using regularly shows your tracks from the past week, recording the story of courtship approach, territorial defense, and post-breeding departure. Temperature regulation requires more conscious attention when your energy reserves are low. The warm afternoon sun that normally feels pleasant now threatens to overheat your exhausted system. Seeking shade during the hottest parts of the day conserves energy while preventing the additional stress of temperature management. Evening foraging becomes more productive as cooler air makes movement less taxing. Grooming activities, normally routine, become challenging when shoulder movement is restricted. Reaching areas of your coat that accumulated debris during recent activities requires creative positioning and careful stretching. The self-maintenance that keeps your fur functional and your skin healthy cannot be postponed, but it must be accomplished within the limitations imposed by your injuries. Your territorial boundaries require reassessment following the breeding period. The areas you abandoned during courtship activities may have attracted other bears seeking to expand their ranges. Scent posts that went unmarked during your absence need refreshing to maintain clear territorial claims, but this boundary maintenance must be balanced against your current capacity for confrontation. Mental alertness gradually returns as physical recovery progresses. The sharp focus required for detecting threats, reading scent trails, and making tactical decisions slowly replaces the post-breeding mental fog. This cognitive recovery often lags behind physical healing, creating a vulnerable period when your decision-making capacity doesn't match the challenges you face. Appetite fluctuations complicate nutrition planning during recovery. Periods of intense hunger alternate with phases when food holds little appeal, possibly reflecting hormonal adjustments following the breeding period. Learning to eat consistently despite these appetite swings becomes important for maintaining steady energy levels during the healing process. The success of breeding provides psychological satisfaction that partially compensates for current physical discomfort. Successful reproduction represents the ultimate territorial achievement, justifying the risks and energy expenditure required to maintain breeding opportunities. This biological contentment helps motivate the patient recovery work necessary to regain full functionality. Food caching becomes particularly valuable when mobility is limited. Storing surplus food near secure resting areas reduces the energy cost of meeting nutritional needs while healing progresses. A partially consumed fish cached in cold creek water provide several meals without requiring fresh hunting effort. Ant colonies excavated near your temporary territory can be revisited multiple times as they rebuild their populations. High country shift snowfields to alpine meadows. The elevation gain becomes noticeable in your lungs and legs as you climb toward the high country meadows. Each 1,000 feet of altitude gained represents a retreat from the warming valleys toward the cooler, thinner air of the alpine zones. Your post-breeding recovery has progressed enough to attempt this seasonal migration, following the same elevation gradient that has provided optimal foraging for the past several years. Snow persists in the high country despite advanced spring conditions at lower elevations. The transition zone between melted and frozen areas creates a unique foraging environment where snowmelt feeds lush plant growth, while persistent snowfields provide cooling relief during the warm afternoons. Your travel route follows the irregular boundary between these environments, taking advantage of both seasonal opportunities. The trail upward requires careful energy management. Your shoulder injuries have healed sufficiently to allow normal movement, but the sustained effort of climbing steep terrain tests your recovered fitness. Frequent rest stops become necessary, not just for physical recovery but for the gradual acclimatization to thinner air that prevents altitude-related exhaustion. Alpine plant communities differ dramatically from the forest vegetation you've been utilizing at lower elevations. Here, the growing season compresses into a few intense months, producing plants that pack maximum nutrition into shorter life cycles. Early sedges push through retreating snow patches, their shoots rich in proteins and carbohydrates needed for rapid spring growth. Glacier lily bulbs represent one of the high country's premier food sources. These plants time their emergence to coincide with snowmelt, creating carpets of yellow flowers that hide nutrient-dense bulbs beneath the soil. Digging requires patience and technique. The bulbs grow deep enough to avoid surface freezing, requiring excavation through rocky alpine soil that can dull claws and tax shoulder muscles. The digging technique for alpine bulbs differs from lowland root excavation. The soil here contains more rocks and less organic matter, making each dig site a small construction project. But successful excavation of a lily patch can yield dozens of bulbs, each one containing concentrated carbohydrates that fuel continued high-altitude foraging. The energy return justifies the increased effort required. Mountain weather patterns create unique foraging challenges. Afternoon thunderstorms develop rapidly in the thin air, bringing lightning, hail, and temperature drops that can be life-threatening above treeline. Your foraging schedule must account for these weather windows, concentrating intensive activity during stable morning conditions while seeking shelter during the volatile afternoon hours. Other alpine foragers compete for the same resources. Mountain goats browse the steep slopes with casual efficiency, their specialized hooves allowing access to areas you cannot reach. Pikas harvest vegetation industriously, creating hay piles that represent concentrated food sources if you can locate their storage sites. Marmot colonies dot the meadows, their burrow systems indicating prime alpine habitat. The marmot colonies present interesting hunting opportunities. These large ground squirrels emerge from winter hibernation later than their lowland cousins, but their size makes individual captures more rewarding. Their colonial behavior and predictable emergence patterns create tactical opportunities similar to ground squirrel hunting, but with higher individual payoffs. Approaching marmot colonies requires different techniques than hunting their smaller relatives. These animals are more alert, more aggressive in defending their territories, and possess sharper teeth capable of inflicting painful bites. Their warning calls carry across entire meadow systems, coordinating colony defense in ways that require patience and tactical planning to overcome. Water sources in the alpine zone flow cold and clean, carrying mineral signatures from snowfield and rock contact that taste distinctly different from forest streams. The high elevation water remains close to freezing even during warm days, requiring careful consumption to avoid shock to your digestive system. But the purity and mineral content make it ideal for supporting intensive foraging activities. Navigation in the alpine environment requires different landmarks than forest travel. The open vistas provide long-distance visibility, but fewer distinct reference points. Weather patterns that obscure distant peaks can eliminate key navigational aids, making it essential to maintain awareness of terrain features that remain visible during storms. Your mental map must account for these high-altitude navigation challenges. Shelter options above treeline are limited, but critical for weather protection. Rock formations, depression areas, and the lee sides of ridges provide the only refuge when storms develop. Identifying and remembering these shelter locations becomes essential for safe alpine foraging, as weather changes can happen too quickly to allow retreat to lower elevations. The psychological impact of high-altitude foraging provides unexpected benefits. The open landscapes, clear air, and expansive views create a sense of freedom that contrasts sharply with the dense forest environments of your lower territory. This environmental change appears to improve your alertness and decision-making, possibly reflecting evolutionary adaptations to alpine environments. Timing becomes critical for successful alpine foraging. The narrow window between snowmelt and the onset of hot summer conditions determines when specific plant foods become available. Too early, and the plants remain buried under snow. Too late, and they've passed peak nutritional value or been harvested by competing species. Your internal seasonal calendar must coordinate with altitude-specific phenology. Salmon run. Scouting, timing the feast. The scent reaches you while you're still miles from the river, that distinctive, wild smell of salmon that signals one of the year's most critical feeding opportunities. After weeks of careful foraging on scattered food sources, the prospect of abundant, high-fat fish represents a chance to build the energy reserves necessary for surviving the coming seasons. But timing your arrival at the fishing grounds could determine whether you feast or fight for scraps. Your approach to the river system follows routes established over multiple seasons, paths that balance efficient travel with strategic positioning. Other bears will be making similar calculations, and the most productive fishing spots can become contested territories where size, experience, and aggression determine access rights. Early scouting allows assessment of competition levels before committing to the energy expenditure required for sustained fishing. The river itself tells stories about the salmon run's progress. Water levels, color, and scent intensity indicate how many fish have entered the system and where they're concentrating. This year's flow runs higher than normal, suggesting good conditions for salmon migration, but potentially more challenging fishing due to deeper, faster water. The chemistry of salmon-scented water provides detailed information about species composition and run timing. Preliminary reconnaissance reveals both opportunities and challenges. The traditional fishing pool below the main rapids shows excellent salmon concentrations, but fresh bear sign indicates at least 3 other adults have already established positions in the area. The alternative site upstream requires more difficult access, but might offer less competitive fishing. Strategic decisions made now will determine your entire salmon season strategy. Bird activity provides crucial intelligence about fish distribution. Gulls, eagles, and ravens concentrate wherever salmon are most abundant and accessible. Their feeding patterns reveal productive fishing areas, while their alert behavior indicates the presence of bear competitors. Reading the bird network accurately can guide you toward optimal fishing locations while avoiding unnecessary confrontations. The first salmon you observe are bright, fresh from the ocean, their bodies still carrying maximum fat content. These early arrivals represent the premium fishing targets fish that haven't yet metabolized their fat reserves for spawning activities. Timing your fishing to coincide with peak fat content means each fish captured provides maximum nutritional return on fishing effort. Current patterns require careful analysis for effective fishing strategy. Salmon follow predictable routes through the river system, using specific channels and resting in particular pools. Understanding these movement patterns allows positioning for interception rather than pursuing fish through the water. Efficient fishing depends more on location selection than physical prowess. Your fishing technique has evolved through seasons of practice and observation. The dramatic lunging attacks that work during peak salmon density would be wasteful during the early run when fish are scattered and alert. Instead, patient positioning near natural fish concentrations allows quick strikes when opportunities present themselves. Energy conservation remains critical even during abundance. Competition dynamics become apparent as more bears arrive at the fishing grounds. The largest males claim the prime spots through intimidation and occasional combat. Smaller bears work the margins, timing their fishing to avoid conflicts with dominant individuals. Your size and experience place you in the middle tier, competitive for good fishing spots, but vulnerable to challenge from the largest males. Establishing your fishing territory requires balancing assertion with prudence. Aggressive territorial displays might secure better fishing access, but could also trigger fights that result in injury or exhaustion. Conservative positioning reduces conflict risk, but might mean settling for less productive fishing areas. The decision matrix balances immediate fishing success against long-term seasonal goals. Salmon behavior varies with weather conditions, water temperature, and time of day. Early morning fishing often proves most productive when fish are active, but human activity hasn't yet created disturbances. Weather fronts that change barometric pressure can trigger increased salmon movement, creating brief windows of exceptional fishing opportunity. Processing and consuming salmon efficiently becomes crucial when fish are abundant. Eating the fat-rich organs first maximizes nutritional gain, while the timing of consumption affects your capacity for continued fishing. Overfeeding reduces mobility and alertness, potentially making you vulnerable to competitors or missing additional fishing opportunities. Food storage considerations become important when fishing success exceeds immediate consumption capacity. Caching whole fish in cold water can preserve them for later consumption, but cache sites must be defendable against other bears and scavengers. The decision to cache versus continuing to fish actively depends on competition levels and your assessment of continued fishing success. The psychological aspects of salmon fishing create both opportunities and risks. The excitement of abundant food can lead to overconfidence and tactical mistakes. Maintaining awareness of competitors, weather changes, and personal fatigue becomes more difficult when focused on fishing success. Discipline in maintaining situational awareness prevents successful fishing from becoming dangerous exposure. Riverbank theater, competition, and etiquette. The fishing grounds have transformed into a complex social environment where 12 adult bears navigate proximity, competition, and feeding opportunities according to unwritten but clearly understood rules. Your position in this hierarchy determines not just where you can fish, but when, how, and for how long. Reading the social dynamics correctly could mean the difference between successful feeding and dangerous confrontation. The dominant male, a massive bear you estimate at over 700 pounds, has claimed the prime fishing pool through simple presence and occasional aggressive display. His fishing technique is methodical and efficient, but his primary advantage lies in the space others voluntarily cede to avoid conflict. Watching him work provides lessons in both fishing technique and territorial management. Your own positioning requires constant tactical adjustment. The spot you claimed yesterday, productive and relatively peaceful, now attracts interest from a female with yearling cubs. Her maternal protective instincts make her potentially more dangerous than larger males, and her cubs' unpredictable behavior could trigger conflicts you'd prefer to avoid. Relocating becomes necessary despite the productive fishing. The hierarchy reveals itself through subtle interactions rather than obvious dominance displays. Smaller bears automatically defer to larger ones, moving aside when approached and avoiding direct eye contact that might be interpreted as challenge. Mid-sized bears like yourself engage in more complex negotiations, testing boundaries, asserting limited claims, backing down when challenged by clearly superior opponents. Fishing etiquette governs the timing and spacing of individual bears within the shared environment. Maintaining appropriate distance prevents accidental contact that could escalate into fighting. Fishing techniques must avoid creating disturbances that interfere with neighboring bears' success. Even successful strikes require awareness of other bears' reactions to sudden movements or splashing. The arrival of a new bear disrupts established patterns and requires social recalibration. This newcomer, a large male with fresh scars, suggesting recent territorial battles, approaches the fishing grounds with the confident gait of an animal accustomed to getting what it wants. His integration into the existing hierarchy will require either diplomatic positioning or confrontational establishment of his status. Reading individual temperaments becomes crucial for predicting and avoiding conflicts. The large female upstream shows consistent aggressive responses to approaches within 30 yards, her warning signals escalating quickly to serious threat displays. The young male downstream appears nervous and unpredictable, likely to flee suddenly or make poor decisions that could trigger chain reactions among other bears. Fishing success creates its own social complications. Bears with full bellies become less tolerant of crowding, more likely to defend personal space aggressively. But successful fishing also demonstrates the productivity of specific locations, potentially attracting other bears to areas you'd prefer to keep less crowded. Balancing fishing efficiency with discrete success becomes a tactical consideration. The established rhythm of fishing activity follows predictable patterns that experienced bears learn to navigate. Peak fishing times create temporary crowding that requires careful positioning and heightened alertness. Quieter periods allow more relaxed fishing, but may indicate reduced salmon activity. Understanding these temporal patterns helps optimize fishing success while minimizing competitive pressure. Scavenging opportunities emerge from the fishing activities of more successful bears. Dominant individuals often leave behind portions of fish they cannot consume immediately, creating feeding opportunities for those willing to approach carefully and accept secondary status. The timing and approach for scavenging requires reading the successful bear's mood and territorial intentions. Physical positioning within the fishing area communicates intentions and status to other bears. Locations closer to the most productive fishing spots require justification through size, fighting ability, or established territorial claims. Peripheral positions indicate acceptance of subordinate status, but also reduce conflict risk and allow focus on fishing technique rather than social navigation. Environmental factors influence the social dynamics significantly. Rising water levels can reduce productive fishing areas, increasing competitive pressure as bears crowd into fewer suitable locations. Weather changes that affect salmon behavior create windows of opportunity that might temporarily override established hierarchies as all bears focus on efficient fishing. The yearling cubs accompanying their mother create unique social complications. Their playful behavior and inability to read adult bear social signals appropriately can trigger aggressive responses from other bears. Their mother's protective reactions to perceived threats make the entire area around them more volatile and unpredictable. Communication between bears relies heavily on body language, scent signals, and spatial positioning. Aggressive posturing can claim or defend fishing areas, but must be backed by willingness to follow through with physical confrontation. Submissive signals can diffuse potential conflicts, but may also invite more aggressive territorial claims from dominant individuals. Learning to fish productively while monitoring social dynamics requires dividing attention between multiple complex tasks. Focusing too intently on fishing can result in missing important social signals that might prevent conflicts. But excessive attention to social dynamics can reduce fishing efficiency and miss optimal feeding opportunities when they arise. The gradual establishment of routine social patterns creates a more predictable and less stressful fishing environment. As individual bears learn each other's boundaries, preferred fishing areas, and typical behaviors, the frequency of serious conflicts decreases. This social learning allows more energy to be devoted to fishing and less to conflict avoidance, benefiting all participants in the riverbank community. Fish, feast, food caches. The salmon in your jaws weighs perhaps 8 pounds, its silver body still firm with ocean-gained fat, despite the long journey upstream. Your teeth puncture the skin behind the gills, releasing the rich oils that make these fish the cornerstone of successful weight gain during the brief summer abundance. The first bite always goes to the brain and eggs concentrated nutrition that provides maximum energy return for the effort invested in the catch. Processing technique determines how much nutrition you extract from each fish. The roe, if this female carries it, contains fats and proteins essential for building the reserves needed for winter survival. The brain tissue provides crucial omega-3 fatty acids that support neurological function during hibernation. Muscle meat, while abundant, actually ranks third in nutritional priority behind these more specialized tissues. Your consumption rate must balance nutritional extraction with continued fishing opportunities. Eating too slowly means fewer fish captured during peak availability. Eating too quickly reduces digestive efficiency and can lead to gastrointestinal distress that compromises further fishing. The optimal pace, learned through seasons of salmon abundance, allows maximum caloric intake while maintaining fishing capability. The feast mentality that governs salmon season requires conscious management of resources that seem temporarily unlimited. This abundance won't last. Salmon runs typically peak for only a few weeks before fish numbers decline and their body condition deteriorates from spawning stress. Every fish not captured and processed now represents lost opportunity that cannot be recovered later in the season. Caching becomes essential when fishing success exceeds immediate consumption capacity. The cold creek water near your fishing position provides natural refrigeration for whole fish that can be consumed over the next several days. But cache locations must be defensible against ravens, other bears, and scavengers who monitor successful fishing areas for storage opportunities. Your first cache site utilizes a deep pool created by beaver activity upstream from the main fishing area. The constant flow of cold water keeps stored fish fresh, while the depth prevents most scavengers from accessing the cache easily. Anchoring the fish under rocks ensures they remain submerged despite current action that might otherwise wash them downstream. Competition for cache sites adds another layer to the complex social dynamics of salmon season. Prime storage locations areas with optimal water temperature, current flow, and defensive possibility attract attention from multiple bears. Establishing and defending cache sites requires the same territorial awareness needed for successful fishing positions. A second cache utilizes the natural cold storage provided by a spring-fed side channel. Here, the water temperature remains consistently cold even during warm days, and the location's distance from the main fishing area reduces discovery by competing bears. The trade-off involves longer travel time when returning to feed from cached fish. Cache management requires ongoing maintenance and monitoring. Stored fish must be checked regularly for spoilage, repositioned if current changes, expose them to scavengers, and defended against theft by other bears or opportunistic predators. The mental mapping of multiple cache locations becomes crucial for maximizing the return on fishing investment. Ravens and eagles provide constant surveillance of your caching activities. These intelligent scavengers understand that bear behavior patterns can lead to feeding opportunities, and they monitor cache sites systematically. Their presence doesn't necessarily threaten stored fish directly, but their activities can attract other scavengers or competing bears to your storage areas. The psychological challenge of abundance management conflicts with survival instincts developed during scarcity periods. Every instinct drives continued fishing and consumption while salmon remain available. but rational cache management requires stopping fishing periodically to process and store catches properly. Balancing immediate gratification with strategic food storage requires conscious decision-making. Digestive capacity becomes a limiting factor during peak feeding periods. Your stomach, adapted for the mixed diet of omnivorous foraging, can process only a certain volume of fish per day efficiently. Exceeding this capacity leads to incomplete digestion and wasted nutrition. Learning to recognize and respect these physiological limits maximizes the benefit from salmon abundance. Cache rotation allows continued benefit from stored fish as fresh catches supplement cached resources. Eating the oldest cached fish first prevents spoilage while maintaining a continuous supply of high-quality protein and fat. This rotation system extends the effective period of salmon nutrition well beyond the peak of the actual run. Predator and scavenger pressure intensifies around successful cache sites. Smaller predators, like marten and fox, investigate areas where fish scents concentrate. Larger competitors monitor your activities for signs of significant food storage. Managing these pressures requires constant vigilance and occasional aggressive defense of valuable resources. Strategic cache placement considers future access needs as well as immediate storage requirements. Caches located near anticipated travel routes provide convenient nutrition during later territorial movements. Storage sites positioned near denning areas offer late-season feeding opportunities as you prepare for winter dormancy. Long-term thinking during salmon abundance pays dividends throughout the remaining active season. Water temperature monitoring becomes crucial for cache longevity. Fish stored in water above optimal temperatures spoil rapidly, while those kept in consistently cold water remain edible for extended periods. Understanding the thermal characteristics of different storage locations helps match fish quantities with appropriate storage duration. Sudden storm, flash, flood, adapt, or drown. The atmospheric pressure drops so suddenly, your inner ear registers the change as physical discomfort. Storm clouds that were distant gray smudges on the horizon 20 minutes ago now tower overhead like dark mountains, their bases black with accumulated moisture. The first fat raindrops strike your fur with surprising force, and the scent of ozone in the air promises lightning, heavy rain, and dangerous conditions for anything caught in the open. Your position at the riverside fishing grounds becomes immediately problematic as the first rumbles of thunder echo off the surrounding peaks. Open water areas attract lightning strikes, and the metal-rich fish in your recent diet could potentially increase your conductivity. More immediately threatening, the creek that has provided excellent fishing conditions shows signs of rapid water level rise as upstream precipitation enters the drainage system. The salmon cache you established this morning in the shallow side channel faces immediate danger from flood conditions. Already, the water level has risen enough to expose cached fish to stronger current that could wash them away entirely. Recovery of these stored resources becomes urgent before flood conditions make retrieval impossible or dangerous. Wading into the rising water to recover cached fish requires careful assessment of current strength and water depth. What was knee-deep water an hour ago now reaches your chest, and the current pressure against your legs makes maintaining balance increasingly difficult. Each cached fish must be retrieved quickly before conditions deteriorate further. The first lightning strike hits a prominent pine tree barely a quarter-mile upstream, the crack and flash occurring almost simultaneously with a sound that seems to split the air itself. Every animal in the vicinity reacts instinctively, birds exploding from cover, ground squirrels disappearing into burrows, deer bounding toward dense timber. Your own flight response triggers immediately, seeking shelter away from the exposed riverbank. Shelter options in mountainous terrain during severe weather require quick evaluation of multiple risk factors. Dense timber offers protection from lightning but might contain widowmaker's dead trees or branches that strong winds could bring down on top of you. Rock overhangs provide cover from rain, but could channel flash flood water into dangerous funnels. Cave systems offer maximum protection, but might already be occupied by other animals seeking the same refuge. You select a position under a massive granite overhang that provides overhead protection, while offering escape routes if water levels continue rising. The location keeps you dry, but allows monitoring of flood conditions and weather development. Other animals have had the same idea. Family of marmots huddles at the far end of the shelter, and fresh deer tracks indicate recent use by larger ungulates. The rain intensifies beyond anything you've experienced this season, transforming from individual drops to sheets of water that reduce visibility to mere yards. The sound of water hitting rock and vegetation creates a continuous roar that masks other forest sounds completely. Navigation during these conditions becomes nearly impossible, making shelter in place the only safe strategy. Flash flood development happens with frightening speed as upstream precipitation reaches the main creek drainage. Water levels that rose gradually over the first hour now climb by feet rather than inches. The fishing pools that were productive just this morning disappear under brown, turbulent water, carrying entire trees, rocks, and debris at dangerous speeds. Wildlife reactions to extreme weather provide information about the storm's likely duration and intensity. Ravens, usually vocal and visible, have disappeared completely, suggesting they expect extended severe conditions. Ground-dwelling animals remain hidden, indicating their weather-sensing abilities predict continued dangerous conditions. Only the hardiest species remain active during the peak of the storm. Temperature drops accompany the heavy precipitation, creating additional survival challenges. Your fur, while water-resistant, becomes increasingly saturated as the storm continues. Body heat loss accelerates in the wet, windy conditions, requiring conscious thermoregulation to prevent dangerous cooling. The physical act of shivering becomes noticeable as your body works to maintain core temperature. The lightning activity reaches peak intensity with strikes occurring every few seconds, some close enough to produce nearly instantaneous thunder. The electrical display illuminates the storm's structure, revealing massive cloud formations that suggest hours more of severe weather. Each flash temporarily destroys your night vision, requiring constant readjustment to changing light conditions. Flood debris provides evidence of the storm's impact across the entire watershed. Entire trees, some with root balls intact, tumble past in the rushing water. Construction materials from human developments upstream indicate the flood's reach into inhabited areas. Fresh rockfall debris suggests the storm is triggering landslides and erosion throughout the drainage. Mental preparation for extended emergency conditions becomes necessary as the storm shows no signs of abating. Food resources cached near the river are likely lost to flood conditions. Territory access routes may be blocked by fallen trees or washed-out stream crossings. Recovery from this weather event could require significant adjustment to established movement patterns and foraging strategies. The storm's peak passes after several hours, but flood conditions continue as upstream precipitation works through the drainage system. Water levels remain dangerously high, precluding any attempt to return to fishing areas or assess damage to cached resources. The waiting period extends as natural systems slowly process the massive water input. Emergency adaptation requires immediate reassessment of available resources and accessible territory. Traditional foraging areas may be flooded or blocked by storm damage. Backup food sources assume new importance as primary feeding areas become temporarily unavailable. Survival during the recovery period depends on flexibility and knowledge of alternative resources throughout your range. Midsummer torpor rest windows. The afternoon heat settles over the forest like a heavy blanket, driving temperatures to levels that make sustained activity dangerous for an animal of your size and dark coloration. Your internal thermostat, calibrated for survival in harsh winter conditions, struggles to manage the thermal load imposed by midsummer's intensity. Finding ways to remain cool while maintaining necessary foraging becomes the day's primary challenge. Your chosen rest site sits in a natural depression where cold air collects, shaded by mature conifers whose canopy blocks most direct sunlight. A small seep provides just enough water flow to create a muddy wallowing area where you can coat your fur with cooling clay. The combination of shade, air circulation, and moisture creates a microclimate several degrees cooler than the surrounding forest. The wallowing process becomes a daily ritual during the hottest weeks of summer. Rolling methodically in the clay-rich mud, you ensure complete coverage of your back, sides, and legs with the cooling coating. The mud's evaporation provides continuous cooling throughout the day, while also offering protection against biting insects that become increasingly troublesome during summer's peak. Energy conservation governs all activity during extreme heat periods. Movement generates internal heat that your body must then eliminate, creating an energy burden that can quickly exhaust reserves during high ambient temperatures. Non-essential activities are postponed until cooler morning or evening hours, while necessary foraging is compressed into brief, efficient sessions. Your modified daily schedule shifts most activity to early morning hours when dew and cool overnight temperatures make movement comfortable. The period between dawn and mid-morning provides a window for intensive foraging, territorial maintenance, and travel that must accomplish the day's essential tasks before heat makes such activities dangerous. Shallow water becomes essential for thermoregulation during peak heat periods. The creek pool you've been using for drinking and occasional fishing now serves primarily as a cooling resource. Wading into the cold mountain water provides immediate relief from heat stress, while allowing continued monitoring of your territory from a position that offers both cooling and security. Panting, rarely necessary except during extreme exertion, becomes a regular feature of temperature management during the hottest days. The rapid breathing that expels heated air and promotes evaporative cooling through your mouth and tongue helps regulate core temperature when other cooling mechanisms prove insufficient. But panting itself requires energy and can lead to dehydration if not managed carefully. Insect harassment intensifies during warm weather, adding another layer of discomfort to heat stress. Flies, mosquitoes, and biting gnats become particularly aggressive during calm, warm conditions. Your cooling mud coating provides some protection, but areas where the mud has dried and flaked off become targets for persistent insect attention. Foraging strategy adapts to heat limitations by focusing on food sources that require minimal energy expenditure to obtain. Shaded berry patches allow feeding while remaining in cooler microclimates. Root vegetables in moist soil provide both nutrition and cooling through the digging process that exposes your body to cooler subsurface conditions. The psychological effects of enforced inactivity during heat periods require mental adjustment to slower daily rhythms. The urgency that typically drives bear behavior, constant attention to foraging opportunities, territorial boundaries, and competitive pressures must give way to patient endurance during conditions that make normal activity dangerous. Sleep patterns become fragmented during extreme heat, as comfort levels fluctuate throughout the day. Brief naps during the coolest parts of afternoon heat cycles provide rest while allowing quick response to changed conditions. Longer sleep periods occur during pre-dawn hours when temperatures reach their daily minimum. Water consumption increases significantly during hot weather, requiring more frequent trips to reliable water sources and greater attention to hydration levels. The clear, cold mountain streams that seemed adequate during cooler weather now become critical resources that determine your movement patterns and territory use during extreme heat periods. Other wildlife adapts similarly to extreme heat, creating different competitive dynamics during the hottest periods. Many prey species become crepuscular, concentrating their activity during dawn and dusk hours, when you're also most active. This temporal compression of activity creates both increased competition and enhanced hunting opportunities. Grooming becomes more challenging, but more necessary during hot weather. The mud coating that provides cooling also traps dirt and debris that must be removed periodically to maintain fur function and skin health. Finding rough surfaces for scratching and rubbing becomes more important when regular grooming is complicated by heat stress considerations. Territory monitoring continues during heat periods, but requires adaptation to thermal constraints. Scent marking activities are compressed into cooler periods when you can move efficiently between territorial boundaries. Visual surveillance of territorial boundaries shifts to elevated positions that provide good sight lines while offering shade and air circulation. Berry bonanza: blue, black, and red. The first ripe huckleberries appear like sapphire gems scattered through the mid-elevation forest understory. Their deep blue color advertising perfect sugar content, achieved through weeks of mountain sunshine and adequate moisture. Your nose detected their approaching ripeness days ago, but now the visual confirmation triggers an almost euphoric anticipation. Berry season represents the year's most reliable opportunity for massive weight gain before winter preparation begins. Your systematic approach to berry harvesting reflects years of experience with these seasonal bonanzas. Different berry species ripen at different elevations and times, creating a succession of feeding opportunities that can extend over several months if timed correctly. The elevation gradient in your territory provides access to early berries at low elevation, peak production in the mid-ranges, and late-season fruit in the alpine zones. Huckleberry picking requires delicate technique, despite your massive size and powerful claws. The berries must be extracted without damaging the branches that will produce next year's crop, and efficiency demands strategies that maximize berry collection while minimizing leaf and twig consumption. Your lips work with surprising precision, stripping berries cleanly while avoiding the bitter green fruit that won't contribute to your nutritional goals. The sugar rush from concentrated berry consumption creates an almost addictive feeding pattern during peak ripeness periods. Unlike the protein-based nutrition that characterized spring and early summer foraging, berries provide immediate energy that fuels continued harvesting activity. The feedback loop of sugar intake and energy availability can sustain berry picking sessions that last for hours. Competition for the best berry patches requires strategic timing and territorial awareness. Other bears recognize the same seasonal opportunities, and productive patches can become contested resources as animals converge on limited areas of peak ripeness. Your knowledge of multiple berry locations across different elevations provides flexibility when primary patches become crowded with competitors. Blackberries present different harvesting challenges than their smaller cousins. These larger berries grow on thorny canes that require careful navigation to avoid painful encounters with defensive spines. But their size makes individual berry collection more efficient, and their later ripening time provides continued high-quality foraging when huckleberries begin declining in sugar content. The thorny maze of a productive blackberry patch demands both courage and technique. Your thick fur provides some protection against the sharp thorns, but your nose, mouth, and paw pads remain vulnerable to painful punctures. Moving slowly and deliberately through the canes, you clear pathways to the ripest clusters while avoiding the defensive barriers that protect the plants from less patient foragers. Wasps and hornets complicate berry harvesting significantly, as these insects are also attracted to the ripe fruit's concentrated sugars. Their presence around berry patches can make harvesting dangerous, as wasp stings on sensitive areas like your nose or mouth could cause swelling that interferes with breathing or feeding. Learning to assess and avoid wasp-heavy patches becomes crucial for safe berry harvesting. Mountain ash berries ripen later in the season, but provide crucial nutrition as other berry species decline. Their bright red clusters hang high in the trees, requiring climbing skills and careful branch selection to avoid falls that could result in serious injury. The berry's tart flavor indicates high vitamin content that supports immune system function during the transition toward winter preparation. berry processing in your digestive system differs significantly from protein digestion, requiring behavioral adaptations that maximize nutritional extraction. The high fiber content of berry skins and seeds provides important digestive bulk, while the sugars supply immediate energy. Eating patterns must balance rapid berry consumption with adequate chewing that breaks down cell walls and releases maximum nutrition. Cache considerations for berries differ from meat storage strategies. Berries spoil rapidly at summer temperatures, making immediate consumption more practical than storage in most situations. However, late-season berries in cooler conditions might be cached briefly in cold water or shaded locations where their high sugar content provides concentrated energy during the final weight gain period before denning. The psychological satisfaction of successful berry foraging provides important mental preparation for winter challenges. The abundance mindset developed during berry season helps build confidence in your survival capabilities, while the stored fat from berry consumption provides the physical reserves necessary for hibernation. This combination of mental and physical preparation proves crucial for winter survival. Your berry-stained muzzle becomes a badge of successful foraging, advertising your productive use of seasonal resources to other bears who might encounter your scent trails. The visual evidence of berry consumption also helps you track your own harvesting efficiency, ensuring you're taking full advantage of available resources during their peak availability periods. Territory expansion during berry season may provide access to patches outside your normal range, but such expansion must be balanced against competitive pressures from bears whose core territories include these resources. Temporary territorial agreements, informal understandings that reduce conflict during abundant feeding, sometimes develop when berry production is sufficient to support multiple bears. Human encounter, close call. The metallic click of a camera shutter stops you mid-stride, the sound as foreign to the forest as breaking glass. 40 yards away, partially concealed behind a massive Douglas fir, a human crouches with a long telephoto lens pointed directly at you. The acrid scent of synthetic fabrics, sunscreen, and human perspiration confirms what the sound already announced. You've stumbled into exactly the kind of encounter that could escalate beyond anyone's control. Your first instinct screams fight or flight, but years of territorial experience have taught you that hasty decisions during human encounters often create more danger than patient assessment. The human shows no immediate signs of aggression, no sudden movements, no loud vocalizations, no scent signatures of fear or hostility. Instead, the photographer remains motionless behind the camera, apparently hoping to continue documenting your behavior from what they probably consider a safe distance. The tactical situation requires immediate analysis. Your current position in a small meadow clearing offers no immediate cover, while the human's location provides concealment and multiple escape routes. The wind direction carries your scent away from the human, meaning they're relying primarily on visual contact and whatever noise you might make. This slight advantage gives you time to evaluate options without triggering panic responses. Reading human behavior patterns has become increasingly important as your territory overlaps with areas of recreational use. This particular individual shows the body language of someone accustomed to wildlife encounters, controlled movements, appropriate distance maintenance, and the kind of equipment that suggests serious wildlife photography rather than casual tourism. Still, human unpredictability remains the most dangerous variable in any encounter. Your behavioral response must communicate strength without aggression, awareness without panic. Standing tall to display your full size, you turn slightly to present your profile while keeping the human in peripheral vision. This posture advertises that you've detected their presence and are monitoring the situation without issuing direct challenges that might trigger defensive responses. The human's reaction proves more predictable than feared. The camera continues clicking, but at a slower pace that suggests document rather than excitement. No sudden movements, no attempts to approach closer, No signs of the aggressive behavior that would transform this encounter from neutral observation to dangerous confrontation. Professional wildlife photographers understand the importance of maintaining respectful distances, but the encounter's duration begins creating its own problems. The longer you remain in proximity to the human, the greater the risk that other factors might complicate the situation. Other hikers could arrive and create unpredictable group dynamics. Weather changes might force movement that brings you closer together. Most concerning, the human scent trail will attract other wildlife, potentially including competing bears, who might interpret your presence here as territorial challenge. Your exit strategy must balance dignity with safety. Simply fleeing might encourage the human to follow or approach closer, behavior that could create dangerous precedents for future encounters. But remaining indefinitely maintains an unstable situation that could deteriorate rapidly if conditions change. The solution requires controlled withdrawal that maintains your dominance while removing the encounter opportunity. Moving deliberately toward the forest edge, you maintain awareness of the human's position, while demonstrating your intention to disengage peacefully. Each step is measured and controlled, avoiding the rapid movements that might trigger pursuit instincts or defensive responses. Your body language communicates calm confidence rather than fear or aggression. The human responds appropriately by remaining stationary while you create distance. The camera continues documenting your withdrawal, but without the aggressive pursuit or territorial following that would escalate the encounter. This mutual respect for boundaries represents the ideal resolution to human-wildlife encounters: observation without interference, documentation without disruption. Cover reached. You pause at the forest edge to assess whether the encounter has truly concluded or might continue in modified form. The human remains in position, apparently satisfied with the photographic opportunities obtained during your brief meadow crossing. No signs of pursuit or attempts to relocate closer to your new position suggest the encounter has reached its natural conclusion. Your stress response begins subsiding as distance increases and the human's scent fades from immediate detection range. The hormonal surge that prepared you for potential conflict gradually metabolizes, leaving you alert but no longer in crisis response mode. This physiological recovery indicates successful encounter resolution without escalation to dangerous levels. Territory marking becomes important following human encounters to re-establish normal scent patterns and communicate your continued presence to other bears who might encounter the same human trail. Your territorial signatures help other bears understand that this area has been recently claimed and defended, potentially reducing their willingness to investigate human activity in your range. The mental processing of successful human encounters contributes to your growing database of appropriate responses to different types of human behavior. This photographer's respectful approach and controlled response provide a template for future encounters with similar individuals. The experience reinforces behavioral strategies that maintain safety while avoiding unnecessary conflict. Monitoring the area over subsequent days reveals the encounter's longer-term impacts. The human's scent trail fades within 48 hours, leaving no lasting disruption to your territorial use patterns. Other wildlife resume normal activity quickly, suggesting the encounter created minimal disturbance to the broader forest ecosystem. The successful resolution validates your careful approach to human encounter management. A scent of danger, other predators, disease. The sour, sickly sweet odor hits your sensitive nose like a warning klaxon, immediately triggering every survival instinct developed through years of wilderness survival. This isn't the clean scent of fresh death or normal decomposition. It carries the chemical signatures of disease, infection, and systemic failure that mark carrion too dangerous to approach, much less consume. Somewhere nearby, an animal has died badly, and its remains pose serious threats to any scavenger foolish enough to ignore the warning signs. Your approach to the scent source becomes methodical and cautious, gathering information while maintaining safe distances from whatever created this biological hazard. The wind carries more than just the primary death smell. Underlying chemical traces suggest the animal was sick for an extended period before death, its body systems failing in ways that could indicate communicable disease or toxic contamination. Visual inspection from 50 yards reveals the source: a deer carcass in an advanced stage of decomposition, but with characteristics that immediately explain the concerning scent signature. The body cavity shows the distended appearance of gas-producing bacterial infections, while the exposed tissues display the discolored patterns associated with systemic disease rather than normal post-mortem changes. Ravens and crows, usually quick to exploit carrion opportunities, maintain conspicuous distance from this particular carcass. Their behavior provides crucial intelligence about the safety of potential food. Sources: these intelligent scavengers possess sophisticated abilities to detect and avoid disease-compromised carrion that could threaten their own survival. When ravens refuse easy meals, larger predators should pay attention. The deer's probable cause of death becomes apparent through careful observation of the surrounding area. No signs of predation, injuries, or trauma suggest this animal died from internal causes rather than external violence. The positioning and condition of the remains indicate the deer likely died slowly, possibly from chronic wasting disease or similar neurological conditions that affect ungulate populations. Disease transmission pathways require careful consideration when evaluating any interaction with potentially contaminated carcasses. Direct consumption represents the highest risk, but even casual contact could transfer pathogens through open wounds, mucous membranes, or contaminated pores that later contact your mouth during grooming. The safest approach involves complete avoidance of the entire area. Your mental database of dangerous scent signatures expands with each encounter of this type. The specific chemical combination produced by disease-compromised carrion differs distinctly from normal decomposition odors, bacterial infections from traumatic injuries, or toxic contamination from environmental sources. Learning to identify these differences quickly could prevent dangerous feeding mistakes. Moving upwind from the contaminated carcass reveals additional concerning information. The scent trail indicates at least one other deer passed through this area recently, suggesting possible disease transmission between animals or shared exposure to environmental contaminants. The potential for local disease outbreaks requires broader territorial monitoring and avoidance strategies. Fresh scat deposits near the carcass show that coyotes investigated the remains, but apparently decided against feeding, another indicator of the carrion's dangerous condition. Predator and scavenger behavior patterns provide reliable intelligence about food safety. When multiple species avoid apparently easy meals, the risks almost certainly outweigh potential benefits. Your territorial use patterns require immediate adjustment to account for the disease risk and potential contamination of the immediate area. Water sources downstream from the carcass become suspect until sufficient time passes for natural decontamination. Game trails that pass near the remains might carry residual contamination that could affect other animals in your range. Competing predators in your territory face the same disease risks, but their responses might differ based on desperation levels or experience with contaminated food sources. Young or inexperienced bears might not recognize the danger signals, while desperate animals might accept higher risks to meet immediate nutritional needs. These variables create unpredictable competitive dynamics around disease sites. Parasitic concerns add another layer to disease avoidance strategies. Carrion compromised by systemic disease often harbors unusually high concentrations of internal parasites, external parasites, or disease vectors like ticks and flies. Even brief exposure to the contaminated site could result in parasite infestations that compromise your health throughout the remainder of the active season. Your own health monitoring becomes more conscious following encounters with disease-compromised animals. Appetite changes, energy levels, digestive function, and behavior patterns require closer attention to detect early signs of illness that might indicate disease exposure. Early detection and response can sometimes prevent minor exposures from developing into serious health problems. Environmental factors that contribute to disease outbreaks, drought stress, food scarcity, population density, habitat degradation, provide context for understanding and predicting disease risks in your territory. Monitoring these broader ecological indicators helps anticipate periods when disease-compromised carrion might become more common and dangerous. The psychological impact of encountering dangerous carrion creates lasting wariness about similar situations. The memory of specific scent signatures, visual indicators, and environmental contexts becomes part of your survival database, improving future decision-making when evaluating potential food sources. This learned caution helps prevent dangerous mistakes during periods of food scarcity when risk assessment becomes more difficult. Late summer gold bulking before fall. The internal switch flips sometime in mid-August, triggered by subtle changes in daylight duration that your pineal gland detects with remarkable precision. Hyperphagia, overwhelming biological drive to consume maximum calories transforms your daily routine, from careful energy management to almost compulsive eating. Every waking moment now revolves around locating, processing, and consuming the massive quantities of food needed to build hibernation reserves. Your appetite becomes nearly insatiable as hormonal changes prepare your body for the final weight gain phase before winter. Foods that seemed adequate earlier in the season now barely register as you systematically work through every available calorie source in your territory. The psychological satisfaction of eating transforms from relief of hunger to an almost manic focus on continuous consumption. White bark pine nuts, when available, represent the ultimate late-season fuel source. These high-fat seeds contain more calories per ounce than almost any other natural food in your range, and productive cone crops can provide weeks of intensive feeding that adds pounds daily to your frame. Finding productive pine groves becomes the primary focus of your territorial movements. The labor-intensive process of extracting pine nuts requires techniques perfected over multiple seasons. Climbing to reach cone clusters, carefully removing cones without damaging next year's growth, systematically processing each cone to extract maximum seed sol while competing with squirrels, chipmunks, and other bears who recognize the same nutritional goldmine. Hazelnuts provide another premium late-season food source, their rich oils perfect for building the fat stores that will sustain you through months of hibernation. Unlike pine nuts that require climbing and extraction work, hazelnuts can be gathered more efficiently from ground-level shrubs, but their ripening time creates narrow windows of opportunity between peak nutritional content and harvest by competing species. Your nut-gathering technique becomes increasingly systematic as hyperphagia intensifies. Rather than casual, opportunistic feeding, you now approach each patch with methodical efficiency, designed to extract maximum nutrition with minimum energy expenditure. Every calorie spent gathering food must return significantly more in nutritional value to justify the effort. Root vegetables assume new importance during the bulking phase, as their complex carbohydrates provide sustained energy for continued foraging, while their bulk helps fill an expanded stomach capacity. Digging techniques become more aggressive, as your need for calories overrides normal conservation of energy during foraging activities. The physical changes accompanying extreme weight gain become apparent daily. Your belly expands to accommodate larger meal volumes, while fat deposits develop visibly beneath your fur. Movement patterns adjust to carry additional weight efficiently, and endurance during sustained activities like climbing or long-distance travel begins showing the effects of increased body mass. Fruit sources receive renewed attention during late summer as various species reach peak ripeness. Mountain ash berries, rose hips, and late-ripening service berries provide both immediate energy and important vitamins that support immune system function during the stressful transition to hibernation. Your foraging routes expand to include previously marginal fruit sources that now justify the travel costs. Competition intensifies dramatically as other bears enter their own hyperphagia phases and converge on the same high-value food sources. Territorial boundaries become more contested as animals expand their foraging ranges in search of adequate calories. The social tolerance that characterized midsummer feeding gives way to more aggressive resource competition. Your daily caloric intake during peak hyperphagia can exceed 15, 0 calories, requiring almost continuous foraging and feeding to meet biological demands. This extreme consumption rate necessitates highly efficient food selection. Only the most calorie-dense, easily processed foods justify inclusion in your diet during this crucial period. Sleep patterns become secondary to feeding opportunities as your body demands maximum calorie accumulation before winter. Rest periods shrink to brief naps between feeding sessions, while traditional daily rhythms give way to feeding schedules determined by food availability rather than circadian cycles. Water consumption increases significantly to support the intensive digestion required for extreme food intake. Your kidneys work harder to process the waste products of massive food consumption, while increased water needs affect your territorial movements and resource priorities. Reliable water sources become even more critical during hyperphagia. Fat storage patterns determine your winter survival prospects, as subcutaneous fat layers provide both insulation and energy reserves for hibernation. The distribution and quality of fat deposits reflect the efficiency of your late summer feeding success, with inadequate reserves potentially leading to midwinter awakening or spring emergence in dangerously depleted condition. Fire on the ridge, forest, disturbance. The acrid smell of smoke reaches you long before any visual signs of fire become apparent, carried on shifting mountain winds that bring the chemical signature of burning wood, superheated air, and that distinctive scent of vegetation consumed by flames. Your nose immediately categorizes the information. This is wildfire, not the controlled burn of human campfires or the brief flash of lightning struck trees, but the real thing, spreading through dry forest under conditions that could threaten everything in its path. Your elevated position on a rocky outcrop provides the first visual confirmation of the threat. A gray-brown smudge stains the horizon where the next ridge over should show clean mountain air. The smoke column rises thousands of feet, indicating a fire with serious heat and fuel consumption. More concerning, the column's lean suggests wind patterns that could drive the fire toward your territory under the right atmospheric conditions. Evacuation versus monitoring becomes the critical decision as you assess the fire's current behavior and potential development. Forest fires create their own weather patterns, generating winds and heat that can change direction and intensity rapidly. What appears to be a distant threat could become immediate danger within hours if wind patterns shift or the fire encounters particularly flammable terrain. Wildlife behavior provides additional intelligence about fire conditions and development. Normally, territorial species abandon their ranges when fire threatens, creating refugee populations in areas that would typically support fewer animals. The absence of usual forest sounds, bird calls, small mammal activity, insect noise suggests animals have already detected and responded to fire danger. Your territory assessment focuses on natural fire barriers and escape routes that could provide safety if evacuation becomes necessary. Creek drainages, rocky areas with minimal vegetation, and previously burned areas with reduced fuel loads represent potential refugia where fire might burn less intensely or stop entirely. Mental mapping of these safety zones becomes crucial for emergency planning. Fire behavior prediction requires understanding how flames move through different types of terrain and vegetation. Dense coniferous forest burns hot and fast, while open areas with scattered fuels might burn more slowly, but still present extreme heat. Steep terrain channels fire upslope rapidly, while wind can push flames across seemingly safe areas with little warning. The decision to remain in territory versus evacuating must balance immediate safety against longer-term survival needs. Abandoning your range during the crucial late summer feeding period could compromise winter preparation, but staying too long near advancing fire could result in injury or death. The calculus changes constantly as fire conditions evolve. Air quality deteriorates rapidly as smoke concentration increases, affecting your respiratory system and reducing your ability to detect other important scent information. The chemical composition of wildfire smoke can be toxic in high concentrations, particularly when it includes burning synthetic materials from human structures. Minimizing smoke exposure becomes important for maintaining health and decision-making capacity. Animal displacement creates unusual competitive dynamics as wildlife from burned areas seeks refuge in unaffected territories. Your range might suddenly host deer, elk, smaller predators, and even other bears who have been forced to abandon their traditional areas. These refugee populations can quickly exhaust food resources and create territorial conflicts. Fire intensity varies dramatically based on fuel types, weather conditions, and topography. Crown fires that jump between treetops move fastest and burn hottest, while ground fires might burn slowly but consume root systems and create long-term habitat damage. Understanding these differences helps predict fire behavior and identify potential safe areas. The approaching fire line becomes visible as evening approaches, an orange glow that flickers against the darkening sky. The heat signature is now detectable even at several miles distance, and ash begins falling like grey snow in areas where wind patterns carry combustion products. The time for leisurely monitoring has passed. Decisive action becomes necessary. Your evacuation route follows the main creek drainage toward lower elevation areas where water and reduced vegetation density might provide natural fire breaks. The psychological stress of abandoning your territory conflicts with survival instincts that recognize the fire's immediate threat to your life. Moving quickly but efficiently, you carry only the energy reserves in your body toward uncertain refuge. Other evacuating animals create a temporary community of displaced wildlife, moving along the same logical escape routes. Prey species that would normally flee from your presence now share the trail, united by common recognition of the fire's superior threat. This temporary truce between predator and prey species demonstrates the fire's power to override normal ecological relationships. Post-fire recovery planning begins even during evacuation, as you consider how landscape changes might affect your territorial use patterns. Burned areas often regenerate with different plant communities that can provide excellent foraging opportunities in subsequent years. Understanding fire's role in forest ecology helps maintain optimism about long-term territorial recovery prospects. Quiet nights, long walks, shifting range. Darkness falls earlier each night as summer wanes toward autumn, extending the cooler hours when movement becomes comfortable and efficient. Your activity patterns shift accordingly, taking advantage of these longer night periods for the extensive territorial travel that characterizes pre-hibernation range expansion. The nocturnal world reveals different aspects of your territory, guided more by scent and sound than by the visual cues that dominate daylight navigation. The forest soundscape transforms completely after sunset. Daytime bird calls give way to the hunting cries of owls, their various species creating a vocal map of habitat types and prey availability. Rustling in the underbrush indicates nocturnal mammals beginning their own foraging activities, while the distant bugling of elk announces the approaching rut that will soon dominate large ungulate behavior. Your night vision, while not matching that of dedicated nocturnal predators, proves adequate for navigation along familiar travel routes. Starlight and occasional moonlight provide enough illumination to avoid major obstacles, while your other senses fill in details that vision cannot resolve. The cool air carries scents more clearly than during warm daylight hours, creating a rich olfactory map of your territory's current conditions. Territorial expansion during night hours allows investigation of areas that might be contested during daylight when other bears are active. Marginal zones between established territories become more accessible when competing animals are less active, providing opportunities to assess food resources without triggering immediate confrontation. These nocturnal scouting missions inform strategic decisions about range adjustment. Temperature advantages of night travel become particularly significant as your body weight increases during hyperphagia. The additional insulation provided by expanding fat layers makes you more susceptible to overheating during warm daylight hours. Night travel allows covering longer distances with less thermal stress, extending your effective foraging range significantly. Cool air scent trails provide remarkably detailed information about recent animal activity throughout your expanded range. The thermal layering of night air concentrates scent molecules near ground level, creating clearer chemical signatures that can be followed more easily than during daylight thermal mixing. These enhanced scent conditions improve your ability to track both prey and competitors. Moonlit navigation relies heavily on landmark recognition and spatial memory developed over years of territorial familiarity. Prominent ridgelines, distinctive rock formations, and major creek drainages serve as reference points for nocturnal travel. Your mental map must account for how these landmarks appear different under various lighting conditions and seasonal changes. Night hunting opportunities differ significantly from daylight predation strategies. Many prey species become more active after dark, but they also become more alert to predators. Nocturnal hunting requires different stalking techniques, greater reliance on sound masking, and patience to wait for optimal ambush opportunities that might not occur during limited night hours. The psychological aspects of night territory patrol create a different relationship with your range than daylight activities. The quiet intensity of night travel, reduced visual stimulation, and enhanced awareness of non-visual cues produce a meditative state that allows deeper processing of territorial information and strategic planning for the approaching winter preparation period. Stream crossings become more challenging at night when water depth and current strength are difficult to assess visually. Your crossing technique relies more heavily on testing each step carefully, using your superior sense of balance and the tactile feedback from your paws to navigate safely across familiar fording sites that appear different in darkness. Other nocturnal predators share the night landscape, creating potential competitive interactions or territorial conflicts. Cougars, wolves, and smaller predators operate on different schedules and hunting strategies, but resource overlap can lead to encounters that require careful management to avoid dangerous confrontations during vulnerable night conditions. Your scent marking activities intensify during night patrols as territorial boundaries require more frequent maintenance with expanding range use. The cooler air preserves chemical messages longer, making night marking more efficient for long-term territorial communication. Strategic placement of scent posts during night travel maximizes their effectiveness for daytime territorial reinforcement. Weather monitoring becomes more critical during extended night travel when sudden changes could create dangerous conditions. Temperature drops, unexpected precipitation, or wind shifts that bring new scent information require constant attention and quick tactical adjustments. Night weather changes often develop more rapidly than daylight systems. Energy management during long night walks must account for the metabolic costs of extended travel versus the benefits of expanded foraging opportunities. Your hyperphagia-driven need for calories justifies longer travel distances, but the energy expenditure must be balanced against realistic expectations of food discoveries in newly explored areas. The transition from night travel back to day rest requires careful selection of temporary shelter sites outside your normal territorial core. These sites must provide security and comfort, despite being less familiar than your established resting areas. Successful night range expansion depends on identifying and remembering suitable rest sites throughout your expanded territory. The crystalline patterns spread across the meadow grass like nature's own artwork, each blade outlined in silver that catches the early morning light. Your breath forms visible clouds in air that carries the sharp, clean scent of temperatures that dipped below freezing overnight. This first frost signals the approaching end of your active feeding season and triggers immediate assessment of your physical condition and winter preparation readiness. Your body evaluation begins with the systematic appraisal that will determine your survival prospects through the coming months of hibernation. Running your paws along your sides, you feel the substantial fat deposits that have accumulated during weeks of intensive feeding. The layer beneath your fur now measures several inches thick, providing both insulation and the energy reserves that must sustain you until spring emergence. The thickening of your coat has accelerated noticeably over the past weeks, your body responding to the decreasing daylight and cooling temperatures with increased fur density. The new undercoat growth creates additional insulation, while the longer guard hairs provide weather protection. Your winter coat represents a significant metabolic investment, but one essential for surviving the temperature extremes ahead. Weight assessment through movement patterns reveals the substantial gain achieved during your hyperphagia period. Climbing requires more effort now, your increased mass making vertical travel more demanding. But this weight gain represents success. Each pound of fat could provide several days of hibernation energy, while inadequate weight gain could mean midwinter awakening and potential starvation. Your energy calculations focus on the balance between current fat reserves and the estimated metabolic requirements for complete hibernation. Based on previous years' experience, you need sufficient reserves to sustain your body through approximately 5 months of minimal activity, with enough surplus to emerge in spring with adequate energy for immediate territory, reclamation, and early foraging. Food preferences shift dramatically as frost damage begins affecting plant foods that provided much of your recent nutrition. Berry quality deteriorates rapidly after frost exposure, while many root vegetables become less palatable as their starches convert to protective compounds. Your foraging strategy must adapt to prioritize frost-resistant foods and the final opportunities for high-calorie intake. The shortened daylight hours create urgency around remaining feeding opportunities, while the longer nights provide extended foraging windows. Your daily schedule adjusts to maximize food gathering during the increasingly limited period when adequate nutrition remains available. Each feeding session becomes more critical as options diminish. Den site evaluation moves from theoretical planning to active preparation as the reality of approaching hibernation becomes undeniable. Your mental catalog of potential locations requires reassessment based on current territorial boundaries, competing bear positions, and the specific characteristics that determine winter shelter quality. The selection process cannot be delayed much longer. Physical condition assessment extends beyond simple weight gain to evaluation of overall health factors that will influence hibernation success. Minor injuries must be allowed to heal completely before denning, while any signs of illness or parasitic infection require attention that becomes more difficult to address once hibernation begins. Competition for remaining high-value food sources intensifies as other bears face the same biological pressures driving your behavior. Territorial boundaries become more fluid, but also more contested as animals expand their search for adequate calories. Strategic decisions about when to compete versus when to seek alternative resources become increasingly critical. Your hormonal systems begin the complex preparation for hibernation physiology, gradually shifting metabolic processes toward the reduced activity that characterizes dormancy. These changes affect your appetite, sleep patterns, and behavior in ways that signal the approaching end of the active season. Fighting these biological changes becomes increasingly difficult and ultimately counterproductive. Cache evaluation becomes important as you assess stored food resources that might provide nutrition during the final preparation period or early den occupancy. Some cached foods remain viable, while others have spoiled, requiring systematic inventory and consumption planning that maximizes remaining resources. The psychological preparation for hibernation involves gradual acceptance of the approaching period of vulnerability and limited control over environmental conditions. Unlike the active season, when you can respond to threats or opportunities immediately, hibernation requires trust in your preparation and the selected den site's security. Weather pattern monitoring intensifies as you watch for the conditions that typically trigger the final denning sequence. Heavy snowfall, sustained freezing temperatures, or storm patterns that make foraging difficult often provide the environmental cues that override continued food seeking and drive the final retreat to winter shelter. Territory consolidation becomes necessary as your reduced post-hibernation energy will limit your ability to defend extensive boundaries during spring emergence. Identifying the core areas most critical for early spring survival helps focus limited energy on maintaining access to essential resources while potentially abandoning more marginal territories. Fuel efficiency replaces food maximization as your feeding strategy adapts to the reality that hibernation must begin soon, regardless of your current condition. Rather than seeking maximum calories, you now focus on easily digested foods that provide steady energy without requiring excessive processing effort from systems beginning to prepare for dormancy. The final behavioral changes preceding hibernation become apparent in reduced territorial marking, decreased competitive responses to other bears, and increased focus on personal preparation rather than external territorial management. These changes signal your body's recognition that the active season is ending and winter survival now takes precedence over all other considerations. Territory consolidation, mapping the essential. The mental exercise of territory evaluation requires brutal honesty about your post-hibernation capabilities and energy limitations. Spring emergence will leave you weakened, your fat reserves depleted, and muscle mass reduced after months of dormancy. The extensive territory you've maintained through the active season must be winnowed down to the core areas absolutely essential for early season survival and recovery. Your analysis begins with water sources, the non-negotiable foundation of any viable territory. The main creek that runs through your range provides year-round water, but several seasonal springs that contributed to your summer territory will likely be frozen or snow-covered during early spring. Reliable water access, within minimal travel distance from your planned den site, becomes the first constraint on territory consolidation. Early spring food sources require prioritization based on their availability, nutritional value, and accessibility under potential snow conditions. The creek bottom area where skunk cabbage emerges early provides critical spring greens, while the south-facing slope, where ant colonies become active, first offers essential protein. These locations must remain within your defendable core territory. Shelter and safety considerations influence territory boundaries, as your reduced post-hibernation condition will make you more vulnerable to both environmental threats and competitive pressure from other bears. Areas that provide good visibility, multiple escape routes, and protection from weather become more valuable when your physical condition limits your ability to respond quickly to threats. Your den site selection process has narrowed to 3 potential locations, each offering different advantages and limitations. The hillside location provides excellent drainage and insulation, but requires longer travel to reach prime foraging areas. The creekside option offers immediate water access, but might be more visible to potential competitors. The ridgetop site provides security but could be exposed to harsh weather. Competition analysis focuses on the territories of neighboring bears and how their post-hibernation needs might create conflicts with your own resource requirements. The large male to the west will likely claim the richest early foraging areas through size and aggression. The female with cubs to the east will need secure areas for raising young. Your consolidated territory must account for these competitive pressures. Travel efficiency becomes crucial when your energy reserves will be severely limited during spring emergence. Routes between essential resources, water, food sources, shelter options must be as direct as possible while avoiding areas where competitor encounters are likely. Your consolidated territory should minimize necessary travel distances while maintaining access to survival essentials. Strategic resource overlays help identify areas where multiple essential resources concentrate within small areas. Locations that provide early food sources, reliable water, and good security within close proximity become the highest priority for retention in your consolidated range. These efficiency zones form the nucleus around which your reduced territory will be organized. Boundary defensibility requires assessment of natural features that help establish and maintain territorial claims with minimum energy expenditure. Creek drainages, ridge lines, and other topographic features that create obvious boundaries reduce the energy required for scent marking and territorial patrols during your weakened post-hibernation period. Emergency resources scattered throughout your current range must be evaluated for inclusion in the consolidated territory. Backup water sources, alternative food patches, and secondary shelter sites provide security margins when primary resources become unavailable or contested. But maintaining access to too many backup resources might overextend your limited defensive capabilities. The timing of territory consolidation affects its success, as premature abandonment of territory might allow competitors to establish claims that become difficult to reverse later. But delaying consolidation until after hibernation risks finding your preferred core areas occupied by other bears who made strategic territorial adjustments during your dormancy. Scent marking strategies require adjustment to maintain claims on essential areas while gradually reducing investment in marginal territories. Concentrated marking in core areas signals strong territorial claims, while reduced marking in peripheral areas suggests availability for competitor expansion. This strategic marking helps manage territorial transitions. Mental mapping becomes critical as you create detailed cognitive maps of your consolidated territory, memorizing the locations of essential resources, travel routes, boundary markers, and potential competitor territories. This mental preparation helps ensure efficient territory use during the confused early days of spring emergence, when physical condition limits exploration. Contingency planning addresses the scenarios where your preferred territory consolidation strategy fails due to competitor pressure, resource changes, or environmental factors. Alternative territory configurations, backup resource locations, and flexible boundary strategies provide options when primary plans prove unworkable during spring re-establishment. Your final territory consolidation creates a defensible core area encompassing approximately 60% of your current summer range, focused on the highest quality early season resources and structured around efficient travel routes and natural boundary features. This consolidated territory prioritizes survival over expansion, accepting reduced access to marginal resources in exchange for focused control over essential survival requirements. Choosing the winter den. The hillside location reveals itself gradually as you approach through the thick timber, following a route that winds between massive Douglas firs whose root systems have stabilized the slope for generations. The potential den site sits beneath a granite outcrop that provides natural overhead protection, while the slope angle ensures perfect drainage during spring snowmelt. Your evaluation process, refined through years of successful hibernation, systematically assesses every factor that could influence winter survival. Excavation requirements present the first major decision point. The existing depression beneath the rock overhang requires significant enlargement to accommodate your increased bulk from successful hyperphagia. The soil composition, a mixture of organic matter and rocky debris, will allow digging, but demands substantial energy investment. Each poreful of excavated material represents calories that must be weighed against the improved shelter quality. Drainage characteristics receive your most careful attention, as poor water management could transform winter shelter into a deadly trap. The site's elevation above the creek bottom ensures runoff flows away from the den entrance, while the rocky substrate prevents water accumulation that could freeze and expand. Previous observation during heavy rains confirms that this location remains dry under extreme conditions. Insulation properties depend on multiple factors that interact to create the thermal environment that will sustain your life through months of minimal activity. The existing soil and organic matter provide basic insulation, but you'll need to gather additional materials. Dried grasses, leaves, small branchesto create the multi-layer system that maintains stable temperatures. The microclimate beneath the rock overhang shows promising characteristics for thermal stability. Security evaluation focuses on visibility, accessibility, and escape routes that could prove critical if winter emergencies force you to abandon the den temporarily. The location is well concealed from casual observation, but offers good sightlines that would reveal approaching threats. Multiple exit routes provide options if the main entrance becomes blocked by snow or ice accumulation. Your excavation work begins with systematic removal of loose soil and debris from the existing depression. The digging technique must balance efficiency with energy conservation, focusing on enlarging the chamber to accommodate your winter body size while creating the proper proportions for optimal heat retention. The entrance requires specific dimensions large enough for access but small enough to minimize heat loss. Construction materials gathering becomes increasingly important as the den takes shape. Dried grasses from nearby meadows provide excellent insulation when layered properly, while strips of bark create vapor barriers that prevent moisture buildup. Small branches and twigs create structural support for the insulation layers while maintaining air circulation that prevents dangerous carbon dioxide accumulation. The bedding layer requires particular attention to materials that will maintain their insulation properties throughout the winter months. Cedar bark strips resist moisture and provide antimicrobial properties that reduce infection risk during extended den occupancy. Dried ferns and grasses create loft that traps warm air while allowing moisture transfer that prevents condensation problems. Ventilation considerations balance the need for fresh air with heat retention requirements. A small ventilation opening near the den ceiling allows air circulation while preventing excessive heat loss. The entrance tunnel design creates a cold trap that prevents warm air from escaping, while allowing fresh air circulation that maintains oxygen levels during hibernation. Final site preparation includes creating multiple cache locations near the den entrance for food that might be needed during brief winter emergencies or early spring when weather conditions prevent extensive foraging. These caches must be positioned for easy access, even under heavy snow conditions, while remaining secure from other predators and scavengers. Testing the den's comfort and functionality requires spending several nights in the completed structure to identify any problems before committing to full hibernation. Air circulation, temperature stability, moisture levels, and comfort factors can only be properly evaluated through actual use under conditions similar to those expected during hibernation. Weather sealing involves final adjustments to the entrance and ventilation systems based on testing results and current weather patterns. The entrance design must allow easy exit if necessary, while preventing wind, rain, or snow from entering the den chamber. Adjustable features allow fine-tuning of ventilation and heat retention as conditions change. Your final inspection covers every aspect of the den's construction and preparation, checking structural integrity, insulation effectiveness, emergency exits, and resource access. This completed shelter represents your winter world for the next several months, the space that must keep you alive through whatever weather and conditions the mountain winter delivers. Final feeding frenzy. The biological imperative driving your behavior has reached crescendo intensity as decreasing daylight triggers hormonal cascades that make food consumption the singular focus of every waking moment. Your body demands maximum caloric intake during these final weeks before hibernation, overriding normal caution about energy expenditure in favor of aggressive pursuit of every available food source. This final feeding phase represents your last opportunity to build the reserves that will determine whether you emerge successfully next spring. Nut gathering assumes desperate urgency as frost begins affecting the quality and availability of many food sources. The whitebark pine grove on the north-facing slope still holds cones with viable seeds, but competition from squirrels, chipmunks, and other bears has intensified to levels that require strategic planning. Your approach timing must balance optimal nut maturity against competitive pressure that increases daily. The climbing required to access unharvested cone clusters becomes more challenging as your increased body weight makes vertical movement more demanding. Each ascent to productive branch clusters requires careful assessment of branch strength and climbing routes that can support your substantial mass safely. Falls from height could result in injuries that compromise hibernation, preparation, or survival. Processing efficiency becomes critical as you work through productive nut sources, extracting maximum nutrition from each cone while minimizing handling time that reduces overall gathering productivity. Your technique focuses on the largest, most mature cones that provide the highest seed-to-effort ratios. Selective harvesting allows more efficient energy conversion than attempting to process every available cone. Root excavation intensifies as underground food sources provide reliable nutrition when surface foods become frost-damaged or depleted. The bulbs and tubers that sustained early-season foraging now represent crucial final calories, but accessing them requires increasingly aggressive digging that exhausts energy reserves rapidly. Each digging site must yield sufficient nutrition to justify the energy investment. Weather windows determine your foraging schedule as temperatures drop and precipitation patterns shift toward winter conditions. Clear, cold days provide optimal foraging conditions, while storms force shelter seeking that interrupts feeding activities. Maximizing productive foraging during favorable weather becomes essential for achieving adequate caloric intake before hibernation begins. Food quality assessment requires constant vigilance as frost damage, decay, and seasonal changes affect the nutritional value of available foods. Resources that provided excellent nutrition weeks ago may now offer marginal benefits that don't justify pursuit. Your selection criteria must evolve constantly to focus energy on foods that still provide meaningful caloric returns. Competition management becomes more complex as multiple bears converge on remaining high-value food sources within your territory and adjacent ranges. Territorial boundaries become more fluid, but also more contested as animals seek adequate calories wherever they can be found. Strategic decisions about when to compete versus when to seek alternatives require careful assessment of competitive dynamics. Your physical condition monitoring reveals the successful weight gain achieved through intensive feeding, but also indicates the approaching limits of your body's ability to continue extreme consumption. Digestive efficiency begins declining as your system reaches capacity limits, while movement becomes more labored as increased mass affects mobility and endurance. Emergency food caching becomes important as you identify resources that might remain available during early hibernation or could provide crucial nutrition if winter conditions force temporary den emergence. Cache sites must be easily accessible under snow conditions while remaining secure from other predators who face similar late-season food pressures. The psychological pressure of finite feeding time creates urgency that must be balanced against strategic thinking about resource utilization and energy conservation. Panic-driven feeding decisions can waste energy on marginal food sources while missing better opportunities that require patience and planning. Maintaining rational decision-making becomes challenging as biological drives intensify. Fat distribution assessment shows the successful accumulation of hibernation reserves, with substantial deposits along your back, sides, and rump that will provide both insulation and energy during dormancy. The fat layers feel substantial when you run your paws along your body, indicating successful preparation for the metabolic demands of extended hibernation. Your feeding schedule extends deep into night hours as shortened daylight compresses available foraging time, while your caloric needs remain at peak levels. Night foraging requires different techniques and presents unique challenges. but the additional hours of food gathering opportunity justify the increased difficulty and potential risks. Territory abandonment begins gradually as marginal areas become too energy expensive to defend while offering insufficient food rewards. Your foraging range contracts toward core areas with the highest remaining food densities, concentrating your efforts where they can produce maximum caloric returns during the precious remaining feeding time. The final assessment of hibernation readiness balances current fat reserves against estimated winter energy requirements, factoring in expected hibernation duration, metabolic rate during dormancy, and energy needs for spring emergence. While more feeding time would always be beneficial, biological signals indicate your body is approaching the optimal condition for successful hibernation under typical winter conditions. The long sleep approaches. Snow begins falling during your morning foraging, large flakes that accumulate steadily despite temperatures still hovering near freezing. This early snowfall carries different atmospheric characteristics than the brief dustings of recent weeks. The steady persistence and accumulation rate suggest a weather pattern shift towards sustained winter conditions. Your body responds to the changing barometric pressure and shortened daylight with increasing lethargy that signals the approaching end of active season life. Your final territory assessment reveals the systematic shutdown of food sources that have sustained months of intensive feeding. Berry bushes stand bare, their fruit long consumed or rotted with frost damage. The ant colonies that provided early season protein have moved deep underground beyond your excavation capabilities. Even the hardy root vegetables show frost damage that reduces their nutritional value below the energy cost of extraction. Den preparation reaches its final phase as you make last adjustments to insulation, ventilation, and emergency preparations. Additional bedding materials gathered during brief foraging sessions provide extra warmth layers, while final structural improvements ensure the den will maintain integrity through months of snow loading and temperature extremes. The entrance tunnel receives special attention to create optimal airflow characteristics. Your metabolic systems begin the complex transition toward hibernation physiology, gradually reducing heart rate, breathing frequency, and digestive activity in preparation for the dramatically lowered activity levels that characterize dormancy. These changes manifest as increased sleepiness, reduced appetite, despite biological drives for continued feeding, and decreased responsiveness to environmental stimuli that normally trigger alert behavior. Final feeding becomes increasingly mechanical, as natural appetite suppression overrides the hyperphagia that dominated recent weeks. Your body signals that maximum practical fat accumulation has been achieved, and continued feeding provides diminishing returns. This biological switch represents fine-tuned evolutionary adaptation that times hibernation entry with optimal energy storage and environmental conditions. Weather monitoring focuses on precipitation patterns, temperature trends, and storm systems that could affect hibernation safety and den conditions. Heavy snow accumulation provides insulation benefits, but could block ventilation if den design proves inadequate. Temperature fluctuations around freezing could create ice dams or water infiltration problems that threaten winter shelter integrity. Your final territorial marks serve as messages to other bears about your hibernation plans and territory status. Reduced scent marking indicates decreasing territorial claims, while strategic marking near den areas signals continued presence that might discourage other bears from selecting nearby hibernation sites. These chemical communications help manage winter territorial arrangements. Physical condition assessment confirms successful preparation for hibernation with substantial fat reserves, thick winter coat development, and overall health indicators that suggest good prospects for winter survival. Minor injuries have healed adequately, parasite loads remain manageable, and your body systems show appropriate preparation for the physiological demands of extended dormancy. Cache management requires final decisions about food storage that might be accessible during hibernation or useful for emergency nutrition if winter conditions force temporary den emergence. Most cached food will become inaccessible under snow, but strategic placement of high-energy resources near den sites provides security margins for unusual circumstances. The psychological preparation for hibernation involves accepting the approaching loss of conscious control over survival conditions for the next several months. Unlike active season challenges that can be addressed through behavioral responses, hibernation success depends entirely on preparation quality and the selected den site's adequacy. This transition requires mental adjustment from active problem-solving to passive endurance. Your sleep patterns shift toward longer rest periods as daylight hours shorten and weather conditions make extended activity increasingly difficult. These extended sleep sessions provide practice for hibernation while conserving energy that would otherwise be expended in marginally productive foraging activities. The boundary between normal sleep and hibernation begins blurring. Final den occupation approaches as environmental conditions and internal physiology align to trigger the dormancy response. Snow accumulation reaches levels that make foraging impractical, while your metabolic systems complete the transition toward hibernation efficiency. The combination of external and internal factors creates the precise timing that ensures optimal hibernation entry under prevailing conditions. The last conscious decisions of the active season focus on den positioning, final comfort adjustments, and mental preparation for the long months ahead. Your carefully prepared winter shelter will soon become your entire world, the space that must sustain life through whatever conditions mountain winter delivers. Success or failure of an entire year's territorial effort now depends on the quality of preparation and the adequacy of your chosen refuge.